Chapter 126. He's floating at a height of more than 3 miles, looking down on the beautiful yet incredibly dangerous scene beneath him, with caution never leaving his peculiar eyes. But this is what he prepared for all those years. Only now did Yasuo make an interesting remark while stroking the shining silver earring on his left ear. It's time to collect what's owed. And so the world witnessed one of the strangest events. Well, not the world exactly, but a lot of people experienced the same thing across the world at the same time. Most of them are people at high status or interesting enough for Yasuo to accept their requests. And a lot of them are Nen users, quite a lot actually. Nen users from every part of the known world felt it. Felt the sudden disappearance of their aura. Not all of it, but a varying percentage of their aura just disappeared instantly. They shared something common with each other that they might not know. They all owe Yasuo. They all signed the contract and uttered the words they can't take back. Even some Nen users experienced the incident, albeit they don't know of Nen, so all they experienced is sudden exhaustion to passing out entirely due to the sudden loss of their aura, and a lot of people owe Yasuo. He made sure of it after all. It was at that moment that several Nen users noticed the disappearance of a percentage of their aura. Some already suspect why such a thing happened, as they already came to a few conclusions regarding Yasuo requiring favors, but no one really knows the truth until this happened. Until they paid the favor, yet almost all of them remained puzzled about the incident, with only 2 people having an idea about what's going on. One of them is the Phantom Troops leader Krilo, who investigated Yasuo thoroughly, wondering why he would make someone like him owe him. Someone like him as in the leader of a group of thieves, a liar, and someone who won't keep his words, and he can't really use force on him, as that's a variable someone like Yasuo is unlikely to depend on. So Krilo came to the conclusion that Yasuo has an ability that forces people to repay the favor they owe him, and his guess wasn't far off, as the moment about half of his aura disappeared, he gained a general idea of why, directly attributing it to the still mystery name Yasuo Zoldyck. The other person who knows what happened is none other than Pito, who heard him clearly say that he has an ability that will force people to pay the favor they owe him, so she put things together but didn't get much time to think about it. Yasuo timed everything perfectly to lead to the current situation before Pito. He only teleported once Gon has fully transformed and delivered the first punch to Pito, then the second punch, which will drive her almost completely unconscious and incapable of moving. Gon of course noticed the disappearance of the majority of his aura, but he didn't care, as long as what was left is enough to kill the ant before him. To fulfill his current desire, as what losing that much of his aura means mattered not to him. That actually didn't matter much to him. He has more than enough aura to finish what he started, especially considering his current horrifying physical strength. And only at that point did he activate his conjuration ability, taking an astonishing 80% of Gon's aura. An aura pool that rivals pre-Rosmarium, and he took 80% of it, the maximum possible amount he can take, and that didn't only happen to Gon, it also happened to Pito, whose percentage of her aura disappeared. Even with her almost completely unconscious state, she still noticed the phenomena clearly, as her senses were still fully working. She noticed the transformed Gon lose almost all of his aura, and she did as well, but she knew that even with that loss, he'll still find killing her quite easy, especially considering her current state. However, she was relieved. Relieved knowing he's no longer a match for the king, even if he was able to reach him. Until she became terrified, thinking of something else. Her last thoughts were about the mysterious man Yasuo. If his ability really worked how she thinks it does, then how strong is he now? How strong is he indeed? That is the right question, as if someone really knows about Yasuo and his ability, horrors waddle engulf them, imagining the state he is currently in. An assassin whose job is to do jobs for payments, and whose payment happened to also be owing him a favor. He was an assassin for years, and he set an unbreakable record for how many missions he finishes in short amounts of time. His invisible strings are everywhere in the world, with his portal's ability giving him a fast passage to every corner of the world, so one can only imagine how many missions he had finished and how much money people owe him. A simple ability he created years ago after finding visualizing it the hardest out of all of his abilities, and its function is quite simple. Owing him doesn't have to be voluntary, as he can make people owe him forcefully under one condition, of course. He can only do so one time a month, and for that, he needs to have complete control over the target's life or existence. The more power Yasuo has over the target, the more the latter owes him. As for normal favors, the maximum owing percentage is 80%, and that's also the same for forceful favors. A limit he had to set to create such ability. And what he collects is simply usable energy, energy beneficial to him that'll make him stronger, benefiting to him. He collects the said percentage, which becomes under his complete control, like it's actually his power. Of course, there is another condition, as such ability is simply incomprehensible if it allowed him to keep that power permanently. The condition is quite simple: that power will only be available to him for 10 seconds and will disappear after that time passes. But there is another limitation, a hidden one that Yasuo anticipated. Can his already satiated cells and soul handle that much aura? Even gone when he sacrificed his everything, his aura pool became comparable to pre-Rosemarium. But for that to even be possible, he had to force his body to such a level strong enough to handle all that extra nen. A level of physical strength unrivaled by most, almost reaching the king's level. There is a limit to how much one's body can handle. A limit Yasuo is planning to get rid of, but now he has a bigger problem before him, as all the aura he borrowed suddenly appeared within his body and soul, an amount of aura never seen before. The combined aura of numerous people allowed him to become a true monster, to say the least, an amount of aura that makes even post-Rosemarium look like a bug. But also an amount of aura that threatens to break his body in seconds. But he knows a few things and has several methods to stop even worst-case scenarios. He's quite cautious after all, so he won't allow such a variable to remain. Among those methods are his studies about souls. Not just his soul but others as well. Using the same method he uses poltergeist pillow, and he found his soul to be nowhere near satiated. In fact, it seems to have an infinite capacity, and the only reason it can't hold all this aura is its connection to his body, a mysterious connection making the two firmly connected to each other, which also sets a limit on them both. An ability so simple yet so complicated, useless in the wrong hands but broken in the right hands. And in Yasuo's hands? Well, in Yasuo's hands, the impossible became possible. The amount of aura he's holding within as he floated high in the sky is simply unfathomable. Yasuo, who has his eyes closed, simply enjoyed the foreign sensation he has never felt, the feeling of absolute power and control. A mirage, as he knows too well how vulnerable he is right now. But that doesn't stop him from enjoying the beautiful sensation as he took a deep breath, something he rarely if ever does, before letting out a small smile that was enough to show his happiness while ignoring completely the pain he feels all over his body. His well-trained cells trained to their absolute limit, were on the brink of collapse. Every cell of his body, from the most fragile ones to the stronger ones, started collapsing on themselves at varying speeds as blood was about to start splattering out of his body by the sheer pressure that amount of aura is applying. Everything within miles away seems to have some kind of gravity applied to pushing everything away as the sound of heavy winds reverberated throughout the field. Heavy winds with their source being him, threatening to take down the tall trees and everything within. The creatures that threatened to endanger him from within were no more as they holed up in the trees, not daring to move even a bit in sheer horror. Chapter 127. Heavy winds with their source being him, threatening to take down the tall trees and everything within. The creatures that threatened to endanger him from within were no more as they holed up in the trees, not daring to move even a bit in sheer horror. The terror of his current power went on to spread its clutches to all that's around him as the pressure he's releasing reached a level where it almost broke the trees closer to him, and that says a lot considering how high up the sky he is. Not one creature within miles of the area dared to make any movement as Yasuo slowly opened his eyes, and the moment he did so is the moment all of that pressure disappeared like it was never there. But the cracks in still heavy winds testify that what happened was real. And it was at that moment he activated his counter for the overload he's experiencing. From his upper back, 3 dark purple threads were made, forming a triangle from which some kind of construct started to form, the 6-armed vision construct with its pitch-black vertical eye showing itself to the dark yet beautiful world before it. From the 3 threads, another construct was instantly formed, the dark purple crow that looked far beyond what anyone can before disappearing instantly, leaving only the 6-armed construct. The 6-armed construct which allows him to break the rules of Nen and his strongest fighting ability, though it only works with the combination of other abilities. And his first goal of summoning it is simple. The construct lifted one of its hands, on which black lines appeared all over it due to the use of violet rose, specifically the negative violet rose, which allows him to heal and restore anything that was set as a target, and his current target happened to be himself. The 6-armed construct he created currently was so enormous it could be seen from tens of miles away, shining brightly in the white field in contrast to Yasuo, who looks like a small dot in comparison. So big it almost reached a mile in height alone, with the 6 arms being even longer than that. And with that arm, the construct attacked Yasuo with his massive arm like a tiny bug before a dragon, except that the construct's hand simply went through Yasuo, dealing no damage whatsoever. And instantly after that, purple lines appeared all over Yasuo, making him look even more foreign than he already is. Purple lines that worked their hardest to fix any harm on him and restore him to his perfect state. And well, it was easy as it happened instantly. Any damage the massive sudden aura overload dealt was negated instantly, like it never happened, and that gave his cells a little bit more time to adapt to the sudden overload. This is but a temporary solution, and Yasuo knows that well. He also knows, however, that he only needs 10 seconds of time of perfect physical well-being before all that extra aura disappears. He, however, didn't retract the vision construct, as he still needs it for his next course of action. Instead, he started doing something interesting. Something fascinating. In the vision state, the vision construct is technically his real body, so as a convenience of the ability, he can output his aura through the construct, and the vision construct's output happened to be much bigger than his normal output, and with the combination of his current level of power, the result was fascinating. 6 massive dark purple suns appeared over the sky from each of the vision's arms, making it look like God's incarnation. Massive round suns with what looked like pitch-black lightning making themselves known around them. The 6 suns have only continued to grow larger and larger, each becoming even bigger than the vision construct before they started contracting on themselves, becoming smaller yet denser and more concentrated. The ability named Explosive Orbs, the one he mimicked from his father Silvazolpsyche. The process was repeated several times, making the sun's danger grow and grow until they basically became at a level surpassing nuclear-level weapons by far. Yet, he wasn't satisfied just yet. One thing that one should understand is that for the current Yasuo, time seems to be warped over him in a strange way, that he experiences the world around him on a completely different timescale. Everything is extremely slow in his eyes, like time fears his existence, so it chose to bend its head for him. So all he experienced since activating his conjuration happened within less than a second, and that's with him taking his time enjoying the beautiful sensation as well as the beautiful scenery. When he decided to start actually using the remaining seconds of his time using the ability, only about a mere millisecond passed as his sense of time became even more compacted. And the process of creating massive weapons of destruction was within those milliseconds, yet he wasn't satisfied, so he continued to make the 6 orbs denser and denser. Until a full second passed, and only then did the orbs reach their limits, unable to be condensed anymore, and something strange happened after. Yasuo looked down on the ground far beneath him, then disappeared. In fact, not just him but even the vision construct with 6 suns also disappeared with him. The destination of the teleportation was unknown, but he disappeared for 6 seconds exactly with no sound made at all. Everything around him and within was within his complete control, and this is another thing that helped against the sudden overload. His control domain, as through it, Yasuo was able to control every cell of his body, forcing his body to stay well put together instead of collapsing, or he at least slowed down the process. At that moment before he disappeared, if time was to be slowed down even more than it already is, and if one observed what happened over that time, is an incredibly large portal appearing. So large in fact that it was able to engulf the whole vision construct as well as Yasuo within, teleporting them both almost instantly before the massive portal disappeared. Only after that 6 seconds passed did he appear back in the same place, albeit the vision construct no longer stands behind him. Something else could be noticed: a significant portion of his aura has disappeared, as if he expended it doing whatever he was doing in those 6 seconds, and that says a lot considering the amount of aura he had, so one can only wonder what it is that he did. Yet a smile never left his face. In fact, he looked a bit happier, as if his goal of being here was fulfilled, except he wasn't done just yet. Moments like this are where Yasuo becomes even more thankful for being born in a family such as the Zoldyck, a family that trains their young ones from their birth, and the same family that trains their kids, torture for the kids to gain resistance towards certain things. Among those resistances, one of them was very important to him, as it's helping even now: resistance to pain. The pain he's feeling right now, like his brain is about to burst. You see, there is something interesting about his control domain: it requires one to have an astonishing processing power. The amount of information one needs to process even with his 400-meter range domain is way too much, to the point anyone but him or someone like the king had such a domain with that much information could lead their brain to explode or simply die directly. Even he needed quite a while for his brain to adapt to the ability at first, and he progressed slowly, giving his brain enough time to adapt until his domain reached a range of 400 meters, and he knows he can handle 600 meters due to actually experiencing such domain due to the Scarlet Eye's ability. But the further from that range, the more burden is put on his brain. However, at the moment, his control domain's range exceeded his previous one by far. The enormous amount of power he has for these 10 seconds pushed his control domain exponentially. His current power pushed it to a range of more than 10 miles all around, and that range only increased once his left eye started shining scarlet, bringing even more beauty to the man floating in the air. The man, wearing a simple black long-sleeves shirt with black pants and black combat boots, his simple attire that suits him quite well. And he can sense quite a lot within those miles, but his domain also delivered so much information that he had a hard time processing everything, leading him to ignore most things he deems useless. After all, this isn't just a line of more than 10 miles, it's an orbital domain with a radius of more than 10 miles. This means the information of even a meter of increase to that is massive, as in the overall space. It's not just a single meter that's added, but a massive amount of space and matter he needs to process. So one can only imagine the amount of pain he's feeling right now, yet no reaction to it was shown on his face throughout the event. Chapter 128. Yasuo again enjoyed the sensation of having everything within his grasp, within his control, and that helped him ignore the pain significantly. He focused on his domain and what he can sense, and the results were fascinating, to say the least. He sensed everything to a very minute level, to the level he wanted, which wasn't anywhere near the microscopic level, as sensing molecules will cause so much burden to him, to the point dying is a highly likely possibility, so he only adjusted his domain sense to the level he wants. However, he noticed a peculiarity: he can sense something else, something interesting. He can sense space, and without the need to use his amplification domain, he can sense space as clear as he used to when amplifying his domain, except now, he can sense every inch of space throughout his domain that surpasses the 10 miles range, meaning he can control it. Not only that, but he can also sense something else, something hidden deep within him and every creature within his domain. A burning fire with varying colors shining within every creature, shining within him as well, with a dark purple color and black spots all around. Yasuo happened to know what the vague thing he can sense is exactly: the concept of souls. Something he studied quite well, but even to the current him, The subject of the souls remains a mystery hard to unravel, as his studies didn't take him that far, but knowing he can naturally sense souls with his current level of strength brought a sigh of relief out of him. Of course, he knows the power is temporary, but it was about what he needed to know, and he knew how strong he needs to be to sense such a concept, that this is why he created the sub-ability called amplification domain. He created the ability to shorten the time needed to sense things. So one can wonder if he used his amplification domain sacrificing most of his current domain range. One can only wonder what he'll be able to sense. What is beyond sensing souls? What is beyond sensing space and souls? And is there something even beyond that? Yasuo was looking forward to finding out. And well, it wasn't long before he found what's beyond, a concept he anticipated long ago. In fact, he found out instantly because of one simple reason and without the need to risk anything. A loophole he can exploit for a long time to experiment on what would need hours to days. Through a simple ability of his, he was to do so much more than what anyone can imagine in an instant, without wasting all of the aura he would have wasted with all those experiments, as even though he used a bit of his aura using the ability, it was nowhere near how much he would have used trying all those experiments. Instantly on Yasuo's shoulder, a dark purple crow appeared with a pitch-black vertical eye on its face, one that blinked signaling something has happened, as the crow only blinks when the ability activates. He also used the ability previously before he disappeared for 6 seconds, although he used it for a different purpose, used it to look at a completely different future, well, many possible futures he could face in those extremely long 6 seconds. After all, what he did was extremely dangerous, and the possibility of death was possible even with his current level of power. The blink that happened instantly before the dark crow also disappeared instantly, and so he saw the future. Not just one future, but he saw many futures in that instant, and the knowledge of what he saw and experienced remained deeply engraved in his brain and soul. Only then did Yasuo start the next phase of the plan, and the simplest one, as he disappeared before appearing miles away standing on the ground, though this time he didn't use his portal's ability to teleport. Instead, he simply manipulated space around him to appear where he wants. And while he was already able to manipulate space to a certain extent, albeit at a much smaller scale, he always found it extremely hard to do, and he needed to train quite a lot to get the hang of it, and his training in space manipulation took more than a year to produce any significant result. That should testify to how hard space manipulation is. How to move space in a certain way to produce a specific effect. That was basically the gist of his training, which took a long time, though it never stopped. But even with all of that training, he still found space manipulation quite complicated and hard. The numerous ways space can move to perform a specific effect made it so it's extremely complicated. Warping space, destroying space, moving space in a way to simply vanish objects, and much more. These are all things he trained in doing, although some were harder than the rest. Some were too hard for them to be possible with his level of power. After teleporting using Nanaka's power, however, he learned quite a lot. When he teleported from the island to this part of the Dark Continent, he observed the entire process closely. The process of space being manipulated naturally and elegantly around him to teleport him to the other side of the world. An exquisite process Yasuo learned a lot from. The process of perfect space manipulation to cause a specific effect. The space around him moved naturally, flowing like spring water without any resistance, and he instantly appeared within the Dark Continent, high in the air in his desired location. Yasuo, with his perfect memory, made sure to memorize every small movement space made around him during the whole process. He memorized to heart the whole sequence of movements that led to that specific effect. He found the process perfect without a single fault, like it's God's work, but he knew he only found the process as such because of his inexperience in manipulating space, so he found the space movement that happened perfectly exactly because it's far out of his league. Or was out of his league. You see, if there is something Yasuo is unrivaled at by anyone he has ever met and possibly ever met, is perfect control and perfect mimicking. His control domain, which allows him to sense everything to a very minuscule level, and his perfect memory is a combination that allows him to mimic anything as long as he's strong enough to do so. So it's only natural he could with his control domain mimic the entire process perfectly, and he was already strong enough to do so even before fully activating his conjuration ability. So in his current state while mimicking the process, he found it a lot easier than before. He still faced resistance when controlling space, but it was way less than what he usually faced, and that says a lot considering the difference in scale of what he used to teleport and what he's teleporting now. Manipulating space to move particles or small leaves is vastly different from manipulating space to teleport himself completely, causing a movement in space big enough to move him for miles instantly. A perfect work of his control. His feet instantly touched the soft muddy ground, or it looked like it, as a thin layer of air separates the dirt from his dark shoes. He looked around with his interest apparent in his eyes in what looked like a slow motion, but time moves slowly around him as if muddled in his presence, so a motion that looked like it happened in a second actually happened in less than a millisecond. He looked at the beautiful white field, at the white plants that looked like rice, albeit larger than normal rice in different color, as each one of them is completely white, creamy even. The white field, another goal of his. Specifically the rice seeds within. These plants are what's referred to as nitro rice, the ultimate secret to longevity. Seeds able to extend one's lifespan, a seed extremely hard to find, yet here he is in the middle of a file of the same plant for as far as the eyes can see. Except Yasuo noticed something about the field and noticed something about nitro rice. It's as rare as it was said to be. Among the miles and miles of his domain, he only sensed about 3 nitro seeds, and that's within the more than 10 miles of distance all around him. If the danger all around is also considered, then that'll increase its rarity significantly. The danger that seems to want to keep its distance from those few nitro rice, like there is a barrier stopping them from reaching it. The dangerous creatures within the field and trees seem to be cautious of the seeds or something around it, as not any creature was within a small distance to those few seeds he sensed. Ones that started flying towards him like they found their new owner. They're within his control domain after all. Chapter 129. The dangerous creatures within the field and trees seem to be cautious of the seeds or something around it, as not any creature was within a small distance to those few seeds he sensed. Ones that started flying towards him like they found their new owner. They're within his control domain after all. The white creamy large seeds that look quite frail, like it's going to burst at any moment just from the light wind around, but it survived the heavy wind produced by Yasuo's power. So frail is definitely not a good description for it. In fact, the outer layer of the seed looks like a sticky layer of rubber, like an undestroyable layer of rubber. A completely white one hiding what's within, but from how the seed behaves, it appears that internally, it's vastly different from rice, as what's inside seems to be liquid. It could be said that Yasuo took his time taking those few seeds, enjoying the level of power he's feeling right now. The fact he is in the Dark Continent and he can look down on all the dangerous creatures around is kind of addicting. The feeling of absolute power, they say such a feeling can consume someone, but not Yasuo. Yasuo knows better. He is the one who consumes, and he has a frighteningly high level of control over himself. So while he allowed himself some time for enjoyment and just messing around, he knows he will reach such a level of power. It's only a matter of time. Yasuo closed his already blank eyes like he is looking at something far away, because while he can allow himself some more time of enjoyment in such circumstances, that doesn't mean he will waste that time, as during every millisecond of him being here, he spread his invisible strings throughout the surroundings. The spread from which he can see further than what his eyes or his domain allow him, the threads that move at a speed unimaginable, as the strings went hundreds of miles away from him in a matter of milliseconds, and they only continued to move further and further. The countless invisible strings that spread their clutches as far as Yasuo's power allowed them to. The power that'll disappear in a matter of a few more seconds, but he didn't mind that as he focused fully on studying the nitro seeds with the amplification domain he just created and spreading his Aranan threads as far as he can. Until his conjuration ability's countdown was finished, meaning all the extra power he had disappeared, which also means he's back to his relatively vulnerable self. The precious ability he named Debt Collector. So precious, in fact it's the only reason he risked coming here and the basis for the first phase. Yet he spent the remaining 4 seconds of the ability doing things that could be left for later. Exploring the dark continent or the small place of the continent with his invisible strings, as well as studying the nitro rice, something he could have done in his lab later, that and also the fact he collected only a few nitro seeds when he could have collected much more. That doesn't sound like something the intelligent and greedy Yasuo would do now, does it? No, it doesn't. That doesn't suit his personality at all. After all, his side quest of being here is getting as much nitro rice as possible, and he definitely won't risk staying here without his debt collector ability active. Well, he won't need to, as the moment the 10 seconds passed, signifying the end of the ability and the disappearance of all the aura he collected. At that moment, the scenery changed as Yasuo appeared, though this time standing in the air in the same place he was floating before. And most importantly, his conjuration ability is still activated as if those 4 seconds never passed, and above all, the dark crow is still standing on his shoulder as if it never disappeared. Some things just aren't as they seem. He smiled, remarking about how his plans went. Perfection. All I need is time. Then before Yasuo's eyes, few nitro seeds appeared, only for him to disappear directly after, with the seeds disappearing as well. He appeared more than 20 miles away almost instantly, and the same thing happened. Several more nitro seeds appeared next to the other ones before all disappeared with him. The most efficient way to get as much nitro rice as possible. His control domain has a diameter of more than 20 miles, which means any nitro rice within that range is within his control, so he simply manipulated space around them to teleport every seed within the domain next to him before controlling space to teleport with them. So what he does is teleporting multiple times until he's 20 miles away from his previous position. This allows him to efficiently gather nitro seeds in the shortest amount of time possible, and while the white field is quite big, it's still not hundreds of miles big, so it didn't take him much time to clean the whole field. Yet even with all of that, he was only able to harvest about 100 of them, but from Yasuo's previous quick study of the nitro seeds, he was able to judge that this is more than enough for what he wants to do. So as research would do, as a scientist who is curious and who is planning on doing more experiments, and someone who is greedy, Yasuo started harvesting more than what he came here for, much more. The muddy dirt on which nitro rice spurted didn't escape his clutches, the astoundingly massive trees didn't escape his grasp. The creatures within accepted their fate of falling on his hands. All kinds of wondrous, bizarre, and dangerous creatures fell prey to his greedy eyes. The 4 seconds were slow, too slow, as the things that he did within them would take someone days to months even to do. His invisible strings saw further than what his domain can reach, much further. And he saw some interesting things, some things that ignited curiosity within his already curious soul, so as predicted, he took them, although there is something that disappointed him quite a lot. The fact that even though he saw the future many times and sent his invisible strings in many directions, he didn't find them. The 5 great calamities, he found none of them, not even Hellbell, which is a calamity that was sighted in the southeast shore of Lake Mobius. But he has only searched for a few thousands of miles, so it's not something he didn't predict. The Dark Continent is just that big. The thousands of miles he explored is an amount of space negligible in comparison, so it's natural he'll find it hard to find, so he just spent the remaining seconds collecting everything he deems interesting. A greedy fellow indeed, but what he got was more enough to make up for it. The countless wondrous creatures were enough research material to satiate his curiosity for a while, especially considering his next phase of plans. That painted an interesting picture, a peculiar picture of a dot that happened to be Yasuo with his completely pitch-black attire, but what's strange about the picture is what lies before his eyes. The strange scenery of 2 strange balls floating before him. A ball completely white consisting of the near 100 nitro rice seeds crowding together, which not that large, as even though the seeds are much bigger than normal rice, there are still only about 100 of them. On the other hand, the other ball is vastly different, a rainbow of colors in contrast to the other ball. The countless creatures and interesting plants and trees and even soil all crowded together, forming a strange ball, crowded just enough as to not cause the specimens to get tainted. His control domain allowed him to perfectly isolate each type of specimen, soil isolated from creatures, trees are crowded together, and so is everything else, especially the creatures, as some could be poisonous and affect some of the other ones or simply stain his specimens, which may lead to faulty research results. The plants from the normal ones to the peculiar ones were also isolated perfectly, and most importantly, every creature he captured is unconscious. A simple process of teleporting the creatures, as they simply have no chance of resisting his control over space, then simply caused a few small movements in their brain to put them unconscious. Something simple for someone like him. The brain is the most complex part of the human body. This 3-pound organ is the seat of intelligence, interpreter of the senses, initiator of body movement, and controller of behavior. Lying in its bony shell and washed by protective fluid, the brain is the source of all the qualities that define our humanity. And other creatures' brain doesn't differ than much. By controlling the part of the brain responsible for consciousness, by just manipulating it slightly, he can cause the creature's brains to go unconscious. It just depends on whether Yasuo can handle the input required or not, and in his current state, it was extremely easy to do so, so he simply took it a step further and put them in a coma just to make sure. Chapter 130. It just depends on whether Yasuo can handle the input required or not, and in his current state, it was extremely easy to do so, so he simply took it a step further and put them in a coma just to make sure. An artistic painting, Yasuo remarked before closing his eyes, knowing full well that he needs the last second quite a lot, so he uttered the simple words only after creating an amplification domain so big it was able to envelop the two strange balls both. So let's go, shall we? He disappeared the same as before. A similar space movement happened, then he disappeared. The wish he made to Nanako was vital for this day. After all, how could he reach the Dark Continent in that amount of time? And that's provided he can even reach it. The Dark Continent is still a dangerous place even for him, even with all the preparation he made, the numerous countermeasures he researched just for the day he visits, but not to this day, as he knew he'll be strong enough that nothing can really endanger his life. He also knew, however, that this is just a temporary power, so when he goes back to the Dark Continent, he needs to be ready, and with how cautious he is, he of course will be in the best shape he can be by that time, and he is confident he will be, as the more time passes the more power he will gain. Yasuo let out a smile. A small smile, noticing the static dark energy within his chest disappear due to the wish ending. Something that annoyed him for a while, so how can he not be relieved when that foreign energy disappeared? Because while it's quite similar to the dark energy the Scarlet Eyes produce, he found it's actually slightly different. The energy produced by the Scarlet Eyes can actually be controlled, albeit it's extremely hard, and when looking into the future previously with his current level of power, he was able to easily control it, and he has a few assumptions as to why this is so. Yasuo slowly opened his eyes to the location he was teleported to, a beautiful, exquisite place to say the least. A massive green hill curved from one side and kind of flat from the other side, with a waterfall flowing down to a small lake beneath the hill. This is one of the rare places within the island, the same island where chimera ants appeared, specifically northeast of the island he took as a new home, as well as the silver snake. A place he forcefully took over before eradicating anyone within miles of the surroundings, not leaving even animals within. Next to the small light blue lake, there is a house, well, more like a large mansion. The home of Morena and him after some renovations, specifically targeted towards his lab, which situated beneath the mansion. Not far from the mansion, countless metallic materials seem to be crowded together, though what kinds of material it is unknown. A material never seen before, at least not in the known world, but this isn't something he brought from the Dark Continent. No, this is something he created by combining few materials together to create a metallic material strong and suitable enough for what he wants to do, so he spent countless days working on creating the material before beginning the production process, which is to a certain extent a manual process. He had to use his amplification domain to control the molecules carefully to form the material, and considering how much he made, one can only imagine how much time that took, and the process is so delicate he had to take his time doing so. He also needed the process to be completely accurate, so he couldn't create something like the genetic elixir machine, as it's a variable that'll only make things more complicated. Though he used it in the researching process to find the different molecule sequences that he can create, although that didn't help much, as the machine was created specifically for genetic improvement instead of molecule structures modification, and according to his assessments, creating a machine for that specific process will need him to research a few more inscription patterns. Barely a few milliseconds of the last second passed before he started what he can call a work of art. In his current state, with all the available power to him, and that'll still be available to him for about a second to go, so how can he not make use of that and perform the greatest piece of renovation ever seen? The mansion was completely empty as per his instructions. In fact, no one could be seen within miles from the house as far as the eyes can see. Within more than 20 miles of him is nothing but an empty jungle. His massive control domain allowed him to make sure of that. That means no one will be able to see the two large balls floating not far next to him, so he used what remains of the second well. First, he created an amplification domain large enough to envelop the whole mansion as well as the lab beneath, and one can only imagine how strong his senses have become within his domain at that point, sacrificing 20 miles of his domain, and the result will certainly be interesting. The mansion started dismembering under his molecule level of control, but to do that, he will need an astonishing level of processing power, and the amount of information his brain needs to process will simply be monstrous. It's a wonder how his brain didn't burst apart yet. Well, it's not a wonder, it's simply the result of a sequence of repeated logical actions. The vision construct behind him looking down on him is responsible. The six-armed vision construct he created once he got here, and the same construct that was repeating a specific process at a speed simply indescribable. The process of Yasuo constantly activating the negative violet rows on the construct's six arms before the latter strikes Yasuo, constantly starting a process of unending restoration, making him basically immortal. The change for his brain to burst hence became zero. The constant fast regeneration made the damage happening constantly to his brain due to information overload negligible. And he can go above his limits exactly because of that, ignoring the unimaginable pain he's constantly feeling. A torturous experience he has to go through, not for anyone else but only for himself. He pushed his brain's input beyond what he ever did, to the point dying would have been instant if not for the constant restoration. He pushed his brain beyond what's deemed possible, and it's not the first time he did this. The other time, however, happened in a future that didn't actually happen. Some of his risky experiments when looking into the future, but none of them came even close to what he's doing right now. A scene that could be described as God's work. The house and the lab started to deconstruct at a molecule level, and that painted a fascinating scene. The scene of them deconstructing into a rainbow of faint colors, as even though the molecules deconstructed, they're still within close proximity to each other. The special material he created also started deconstructing into its purest form, a bunch of atoms. Well, there are things that form the atoms themselves, but Yasuo didn't need to deconstruct anything to that level yet. The scenery started changing within more than a mile around him to creating a painting even more beautiful, shaping a waterfall much bigger than before, and constructing a large piece of land perfectly suitable for what he wants to build. The reconstruction process started, one specifically targeted towards the new materials he created, as he already created a detailed design of what he wants the house and the lab to look like, and so, the atoms started to get structured together, forming molecules. The atoms attached to each other under his complete control, forming chemical substances and materials he will use for his design. And another interesting thing he prepared is large amounts of carbons. Massive amounts of pure carbons he extracted from materials that contain high quantities of carbon, such as graphite. And if carbon is put under extreme pressure and temperature, the result is quite interesting yet simple: diamonds. Diamonds were formed over 3 billion years ago deep within the planet's crust under conditions of intense heat and pressure that cause carbon atoms to crystallize, forming diamonds. So if Yasuo is able to apply the same pressure and heat on carbon, then he logically can create diamonds, but that's not what he did. You see, carbon happened to be an important atom, one of the most important atoms in nature if not the most important. The fundamental component for all of these macromolecules is carbon. The carbon atom has unique properties that allow it to form covalent bonds to as many as 4 different atoms, making this versatile element ideal to serve as the basic structural component, or backbone, of the macromolecules. And that says a lot considering that the macromolecule is a very large molecule, such as a protein. They are composed of thousands of covalently bonded atoms. Many macromolecules are the polymerization of smaller molecules called monomers. Chapter 131. The atoms started getting attached to each other as 2 massive structures started forming before him, though one is much bigger than the other. His lab, which he plans on using for a long time, will be the biggest structure of the 2, much bigger, as the 2 large balls next to him will be placed inside and they're too valuable to leave it anywhere else. The new molecule started forming everywhere with carbon as its foundation and other atoms getting attached to it in a specific structure perfectly controlled by Yasuo himself. The specific structure was the result of Yasuo's long time of research, structured in a way to allow even more atoms to attach to them. A series of carbon atoms attached to several other atoms which by themselves is attached to several other atoms formed an interesting molecule. He, however, is far from being done, as even though the resulting molecule is already quite strong, it's still only a little bit stronger than the strength of diamonds. The greedy person he is, he wants more, something much greater. When he started his research regarding creating an unbreakable material, he picked a starting molecule, one that'll help him make the researching process faster. That molecule is osmium, a chemical element with the symbol Os and atomic number 76. It is a hard, brittle, bluish-white transition metal in the platinum group that is found as a trace element in alloys, mostly in platinum ores, and most importantly, it's extremely dense and hard, nearly as hard as a diamond and the densest element found. The resulting structure ended up being quite complicated, but he got what he wanted, and there is something interesting about osmium and its structure. It's extremely dense to an astonishing degree, meaning its atoms are structured in a certain way that allowed them to crowd together. That crowding of atoms is what formed that density, as density is simply a measure of how much mass there is per volume. For osmium to become that dense, it took a high amount of pressure and temperature, something Yasuo didn't apply yet, which says a lot considering the material is already stronger than diamond. So he finished forming countless molecules of the new material, an element he named Yasium, a pretty simple name. After all, this is his baby, his creation. Every human has an ego, no matter how small it is, and Yasuo does as well, so of course he will be proud of himself and name the element based on his name. And only after that did Yasuo started the simple process of applying pressure on the countless elements before him, which will produce the necessary heat for the operation. The gathering of the countless Yasium molecules together made the element's appearance apparent, a dark grayish material that became darker and darker as the molecules started crowding together under Yasuo's control. An extremely massive ball of dark gray material that started to get smaller and smaller under his gravitational push. A push applied equally from all directions on the ball, starting to create the pressure he wants. But the pressure he desires to create is much greater than that, so he continued increasing the pressure at an astonishing speed, and as a logical assessment one would make, the smaller the ball became, the more resistance it produced, meaning the harder it is for it to become even smaller. The hotter the ball became, the harder it is for it to become even hotter, as the friction between atoms will need to become much higher to produce more heat than it already is. That, however, didn't seem to be an obstacle for the current Yasuo, as with his current power, as he continued to apply even more pressure on the ball, to the point that not only did the Yasium molecules crowd it together to an astonishing degree, creating as much as no space between them, that crowding of the molecule also started affecting the molecule structure. The atoms that formed this particular molecule, or specifically the structure that started to slightly change with the atoms closing distance with each other forcefully, with affecting the general structure. That continued until the friction between the atoms produce enough heat, creating an exquisite painting. The dark gray ball started slightly shining in what looked like a combination of yellow and red. The temperature within and in the ball's surroundings continued to rise. A condensed yellow sun floating high in the air, a shining metallic ball so dense its gravitational attraction became large enough to slightly affect the surroundings, albeit at a much larger scale, as it's something extremely hard to notice if not for Yasuo's control domain allowing him to sense the ball's activity to the atomic level with absolute clarity. Yasuo smiled, sensing something interesting. The carbon atoms within the yasium molecule started to crystallize, forming into something fascinating. Something that brought a new color to the yasium ball. The previously dark gray color turned into a lighter shade of gray. Well, a darker shade of silver color is a more fitting description. A color Yasuo saw clearly beneath the red shining ball. That means that the carbon within the molecule turned into the indestructible diamond. Well, it's destructible, but it's hard enough to be called the second hardest material in the known world, not far behind graphene, which is also formed by carbon. Carbon. An interesting atom indeed, and while graphene was an option for him, it still didn't satisfy his needs. Carbon can bond with several other atoms at once, and if bounded by another carbon atom, that makes the possible combinations even greater. And graphene happened to be made up of carbon atoms bonded together to form a sheet just one atom thick. The honeycomb arrangement of the atoms allows graphene to be very flexible as well as porous and lightweight. Yasuo didn't like this because while it's the strongest material known so far, that's considered by normal people's standards, he isn't a normal person now, is he? And his standards happened to be extremely high, allowing him to see something else in carbon. The atom that can bond to as many as 4 different atoms is quite special, and Yasuo made use of that with his control domain. He forced the carbon atom to bond with all the known atoms and any other unknown atom he found, even the radioactive ones, and that includes radioactive carbon. The numerous combination of that research not only led Yasuo to discover the new forcefully made element called yasium was created, it also made his knowledge about biology and quantum chemistry reached a whole new level. However, there is something strange that one can notice. The process happened too fast. Everything around him seems to move so slow, like a snail climbing a mountain facing the opposition force called gravity, but this is not the case. Every action of his is just too fast beyond human comprehension, to the point that the fabric of time around him appears to be distorted. But the same couldn't be said for the ball before him. In its point of view, the gears of time moved like they always do, yet against what one would expect, the entire previous process happened in the span of hundreds of milliseconds. Even though things at the quantum level move at different speeds and the activity of that level are much faster, and Yasuo accelerated the yasium element's creation with his control domain, even with all of that, the process is still predicted to take minutes, yet it happened in less than half a second. Interesting indeed. This is due to the third force he sensed with his control domain. The force he's sensing right now with his amplification domain, due to sacrificing about 20 miles of his domain range, not just sensing but also controlling it. The concept of time. Time is the indefinite continued progress of existence and events that occur in an apparently irreversible succession from the past, through the present, into the future. It is a component quantity of various measurements used to sequence events, to compare the duration of events or the intervals between them, and to quantify rates of change of quantities in material reality or in the conscious experience. Time is often referred to as a fourth dimension, along with 3 spatial dimensions. Yet time remains something untouchable, like an illusion. We know it's there, we know it exists, as we defined what is it. We defined that already existing concepts of the universe and gave them names for us, but even with how illusionary time is, we can actually see through it. Each time we look up to the sky, we are actually looking back through time, looking into the past. It's easy to look into the past, as there is not one day of our life where we don't do that. Light plays an essential role in this, as even the nearest star to Earth, the sun, is affected by this. We always see the past sun, specifically the sun, how it actually was 8 minutes. This is all due to how long light takes to reach us, and that's the current limit of how much can humans mess with time. Of course, there is the strange concept of Nen allowing humans to do more, much more. Chapter 132. We always see the past sun, specifically the sun, how it actually was 8 minutes. This is all due to how long light takes to reach us, and that's the current limit of how much can humans mess with time. Of course, there is the strange concept of Nen allowing humans to do more, much more. What Yasuo has performed and is performing took that to a whole new level, time manipulation or time control in its finest form. The new force he sensed, named time, didn't escape his grasp, nor was it able to hide from his predictions of what that force can be. So it lied underneath his emotionless eyes, unable to offer any resistance under his average control. You see, his vision eye ability is quite broken, too broken even, but that depends on the person possessing the ability and in Yasuo's hands. With his current aura pool, he made use of the ability to the limits he set. Activating the ability and looking into a future where he trains his control over time, a concept he just sensed, meaning his control over it is unrefined, to say the least. And through those few seconds where he can actually sense time, he trains his control over it until the debt collector ability deactivate due to the 10 seconds limit finishing. Then he stops looking into the future and repeats the same process, except for this time he has all the knowledge and proficiency he gained from his previous future training and continues more training on top of that. Yasuo is good at detecting holes and weaknesses, and he noticed one about his vision eye ability: the aura he depletes in the future he experience matters not. Even if his aura becoming completely expended in that future, once he stops seeing into the future, the aura he consumed in that future won't matter, as that never actually happened. What matters is how much aura he expended looking into the future through his ability, and in this situation, he only looks into the future for a few seconds, and considering that the further into the future he looks, the bigger the consumption, this means his consumption throughout the process was minimum. So with his current aura pool and the goal to leave more than enough aura for his current construction plan, he used massive amounts of aura looking into the future for those few seconds and practiced his time control skills to a satisfactory level. And one thing he found through all that training is that controlling time is much easier than controlling space, yet quite similar at the same time, so he didn't find as much trouble learning how to control it, in contrast to how long he took to be good enough at controlling space. This is strange, to say the least, considering that he only started sensing time after he sensed space and souls respectively. Well, Yasuo found the answer to that quite easily. In fact, it's something he didn't need much thinking to predict. The fact that controlling space affects time while the opposite isn't true. Through his training in controlling space and his general research about space, he came to the logical conclusion that controlling space can affect the time within that space, albeit at a negligible scale. With that added to space's complexity, which he found to be quite more complex, as space manipulation's possible applications are much broader than time manipulation, yet time manipulation's consumption was found to be much bigger than space's, which is interesting and something he will keep in mind. So he made full use of his vision eye to get as proficient with it as possible. If the time he spent training was counted, it will amount to weeks of constant training, which should testify to how astonishing his aura pool has become after activating his conjuration ability. And that says a lot, considering an interesting fact about the ability. Every time someone owes him, the percent owed will be saved in Yasuo's brain to heart, as if he forgot about it, he won't be able to collect the debt. This is a hidden risk of the ability, though not for Yasuo. And when he activates the ability, which he can do whenever he wants, he himself has to decide which of the debts he wants to collect, so who's to say if he actually collected all the debts for his current plan? Yasuo is cautious, too cautious, so who's to say he didn't leave some debts uncollected just in case? In all of that time, while Yasuo wasn't able to perfect his control over time, with the fact that space and time are quite similar and his current proficiency in controlling space, he was able to get the hand of some basic concepts. One of them happened to be time acceleration, which he applied on the ball to make the process happen much faster, albeit his control over time is still a bit rough, so while he succeeded, it still took quite a bit of time, and by that, almost the whole seconds, leaving about 100 milliseconds for the last bit of the construction process. And after stopping the time acceleration process, he started constructing the mansion and the lab with the same material he just created. His obvious plan is to construct them using Yazium, creating something indestructible, yet the material before him, which is much stronger than diamond and even graphene, seemed weak in his hands. A thought of his made the large undestroyable ball becoming something else. It was like he made the solid element turn to a fluid one as the ball gently split into two before they started flowing around like a river without obstructions. The ball split into two flowing rivers of different sizes. One much smaller, which started to form to an exquisite elegant silverly mansion in a matter of milliseconds, while the bigger part started forming to a strangely shaped building. An extremely massive decagonally shaped building, and what's even more peculiar about it is the fact it has no doors, no holes, or anything else in its design. A simple plain silverly decagonal building with no way for oxygen to pass through, making it unlivable inside. On the inside, there are numerous rooms, from extremely large to normal-sized ones, though the room has what looked like small windows connected to other rooms as if to let oxygen pass through. Unexisting oxygen, because there is no way for it to enter the building in the first place, so once the O2 that's already there depletes, there will no longer be any oxygen left. Yasuo of course wouldn't let such an error exist, so from behind him a large portal appeared from which countless things appeared. Things including the tools that were in Yasuo's lab, from test tables to the large tubes with chimera ants to other creatures in them. There are also several isolated glass chambers with some specimens in them, one of which has one of his ongoing experiments, specimens infected with zombie disease. And even though he already got some satisfactory results which he used on himself, he can see more in the disease than anyone else, so he never stopped his research on it. Everything a lab as massive as the one he just created is available, including a massive oxygen tank and massive electric batteries and generators as well, and everything needed for the lab to work. The lab has no openings, so how can he transfer these things inside? Quite simple actually, he just controlled space with the purpose of teleporting everything inside, though at different rooms. Each tool or tubes and work tables in the room he created specifically for them, and the countless empty large tubes prepared specifically for the massive ball of creatures and wondrous things he just brought. And so the lab was finished instantly. A working massive lab was created in seconds with everything he could ever need inside, and the same happened to the mansion with all kinds of decors and necessities already inside. The last phase of the operation is quite simple as well. Similar to how he teleported his house and previous lab from the Kakan Empire to here, he simply manipulated space to teleport a large amount of soil and rocks from beneath, creating a large vacant space perfectly fitting the decagonal lab. And well, the lab teleported, taking that vacant space. The lab was placed about 500 meters beneath the ground, with the mansion getting also teleported above the ground with a foundation suitable for the building, as he has plans for the two structures. Moving lab and mansion he can take anywhere with him through portals, make this quite easy. He also created the lab without any exits or entrance, completely closed, that even the smallest of atoms will find it hard to get in with the density of Yazium element. In fact, even photons will find it near impossible to get in. A perfectly tight closed building only he can enter. He can see everything within his control domain, with the latter ignoring any barrier. His domain's range is absolute, with nothing having the capability to hold it back, so the density of a barrier matters not in his eyes. And anything he sees is within his teleportation range, so he is basically the only one able to enter, excluding other people with teleportation abilities. Of course, Yasuo already prepared for that. Hey, quick break time. If you're still listening to this, you're probably really enjoying this. So let's not take up too much time and keep going. Chapter 133. He can see everything within his control domain, with the latter ignoring any barrier. His domain's range is absolute, with nothing having the capability to hold it back, so the density of a barrier matters not in his eyes. And anything he sees is within his teleportation range, so he is basically the only one able to enter, excluding other people with teleportation abilities. Of course, Yasuo already prepared for that. If someone were to suddenly appear within the lab, what they'll find is no heaven, nothing pleasing. What they'll find is a no man's land. A poisonous prison from which none can escape. Well, some might escape. The important thing is that they set foot in the lab's interior, meaning their death has already been set in stone. And Yasuo actually started the process immediately, several processes in fact. One of the benefits of his continuous research on zombie disease is an enhanced zombie organism specifically made for pure destruction, solely to bring death, and he modified its DNA as to survive much longer without food. And he slightly succeeded in managing to prolong their lifespan even when starved to about a month, and he has a lot of specimens infected within a special room in the new lab, so that means an infinite supply of the disease, so he teleported them to most of the rooms that don't have any living creatures within and allowed the disease some level of freedom. Well, the phages clutching tightly on the zombie organism seem to disagree. After all, how can Yasuo allow it any level of freedom at all? Perfectly controlled zombie organisms. That and other countermeasures he prepared, which will make the lab even more dangerous, like some poisonous gases that he just spread through some specific completely closed rooms. Specifically, the outmost rooms of the building, which he left empty and completely closed just for that sole purpose. The other process he started is of course the inscribing process, engraving the mysterious inscriptions all over the lab down to every cranny of it. And to that, he created numerous needles made out of the same material, and with his nen enhancing the needles, he was able to engrave several inscriptions on the whole lab and the mansion within no time, with his nen feeding the unending hunger of the inscriptions. He then placed the huge ball of creatures and plants and other exotic things in specific rooms prepared for them, with each type isolated from the other, while also injecting them with a coma-inducing potion just in case. He also teleported nitro rice to the special yet simple room he prepared specifically for nitro rice, with freezers suitable for the job. Yasuo let out a serene smile watching his work of art, and couldn't help but be proud of how far he has come. With his current expression, the word abnormal didn't suit him anymore, simply a handsome human who is letting his emotions out as he closed his eyes, taking a deep breath. Yasuo worked hard while also relaxing and having fun along the way, and this is his goal, achieving what he wants without feeling like he suffered along the way, without any regrets. Instead, all he feels is pure satisfaction as he let that breathe out. At that moment he looked bright like a white sun in the dark sky, truly happy with what he created and what he achieved. Of course, this is but the beginning of his long everlasting life. One last thing, remarked Yasuo in a calm, gentle tone, yet throughout the sentence, no more than milliseconds passed. He started the last thing he can and want to do. The dark purple crow appeared on his shoulder and blinked instantly. Then blinked again and again, numerous times. The process happened in few milliseconds, testifying to how fast it actually is, but he living a different life within those few milliseconds. He saw countless futures continuously expending his current astonishing aura pool until only the same amount as his normal aura pool remained. He made full use of the 10 seconds where that massive amount of aura is available to him, and he made sure to expend it fully before time is up, which is something almost completely impossible for anyone but him. That amount of aura expending in 10 seconds is almost impossible, meaning that anyone but him will simply waste all the remaining aura, since after that 10 seconds is finished, every debt he collected will no longer be available, and he will have to collect other debts and make people and things owe him again, as the remaining aura will simply disappear. He however has many ways to do so. One of them happened to be his vision eye ability, which allows him to look into the future as well as the past, so he used it to look into the future repeatedly, and he learned a lot from continuing his training over time and space to training the still mysterious concept called souls. And he specifically focused on gaining more proficiency with his control domain, specifically how to process information better and how to ignore unnecessary information better as well, and pushing what he can do with his domain further. The 10 seconds finished, signifying the timeout of the ability, meaning all the collected aura has disappeared, though he already expended it all, leaving only his original aura pool alone, and he noticed something interesting. He noticed some changes in his control domain, some interesting changes, one of which is an increase of about 300 meters in his domain's range, reaching 700 meters, and that's without using his scarlet eye, but that's the most normal change. The most important change he noticed is that he can still sense space, albeit vaguely, but this is a huge improvement considering he needed to sacrifice most of his domain range previously to sense it with his amplification domain, while now, he already deactivated his amplification domain, yet he can still sense it. Even though it's much harder to control space with how vague he can sense it right now, but according to his assessment, sacrificing about 300 meters of his domain will allow him to sense space clearly, meaning he can instantly teleport anywhere within his domain, which will be quite large, having a range of about 500 meters if he activated his scarlet eye. He also noticed his overall sense and control within his domain has become much clearer. He felt his already perfect control go beyond what it was supposed. The vague feeling he felt in his previous overpowered state remained. The vague feeling like he can break the rules forcefully through with his absolute control. Normally he needs precise, meticulous control to do anything with his domain, making use of the laws of physics to produce desired effects, and he considers that a limiter because while he still wants to make use of those laws, he also wants to go beyond that. He wants to create those effects with his absolute control alone simply because he wants to, ignoring the rules set upon him by the universe, and to a certain extent, space, souls, and time control are kind of breaking the rules. Of course, he is greedy, so he wants more, much more. Yasuo once had a dream, long ago, when he still didn't have that much control over his mind. Not long before he created his control domain, and not long before he found himself to be a specialist, not long after seeing the effect of his aura during the water divination test. A dream of himself standing in the darkness of space, as he looked down on the massive bright star before him that seemed to want to lit the light within him even more. Darkness, however, thought otherwise, creating a perfect balance. Or so did they thought. Yasuo thought otherwise, looking down on the forces trying to put him within their grasp. Puny forces he could erase with a thought. Yasuo made no movement, yet the sun disappeared, erased from existence. The sun appeared again as if what happened has never happened, as numerous suns appeared throughout the vastness of space, eliminating the darkness. He simply controlled the sun to disappear instantly, and he simply controlled reality for the numerous suns to appear. At the moment in his dream, he knows his level of power. True absolute control. And he felt that vague sense of absolute control during the previous 10 seconds. He felt like he doesn't need to respect the laws of physics, like with just thoughts alone he can create simple forms of life, an illusionary feeling, but that doesn't mean it's not real. Yasuo knows it's real. After all, he is the creator of the ability, that is his desire, absolute control. He created the ability with that goal in mind, so he knows it's only a matter of time before that becomes possible, but for now, he has some interesting plans he needs to finish. The previously shining smile turned to a calm one, as if expressionless, as talked to himself in what appears to be whispering, "I had to hold back a lot. Just for this day. I didn't want many things to change and some people to die just for this day, so I can be as strong as possible and fulfill my goal. I did, so what's stopping me now from doing what want? From harvesting the seeds that have grown enough." Chapter 134. The previously shining smile turned to a calm one, as if expressionless, as talked to himself in what appears to be whispering, "I had to hold back a lot. Just for this day. I didn't want many things to change and some people to die just for this day, so I can be as strong as possible and fulfill my goal. I did, so what's stopping me now from doing what want? From harvesting the seeds that have grown enough." He directly added before disappearing, "Now, I just need to get the key specimens as well as some side ones and do some research before starting the transformation." Not long after, near the royal palace of the Republic of East Gorto, what looked like a small bug could be seen flying around, but a bag is further than what it actually is. The flying creature couldn't be just a simple bug. If observed up close, one would easily notice the clear human features and clothes on it, as well as the beautiful rainbow butterfly wings. Poof, one of the royal guards. He is in the process of doing something extremely important to him, something that will set the future of the king even if it's against the latter's wishes. However, he doesn't consider this a betrayal at all. He truly believes this is for the king. His loyalty is what drove him to this, lead him to have that deep desire to kill Komugi. To kill that bright light within the king's heart, the light that changed him from what a king should be. From the high state he sees the king, and so he decided, for the good of the king, he decided to eliminate that bright light which he is currently looking for. The circumstances seemed to be on his side, as his king had a memory loss after surviving the explosion. Barely surviving with memory loss served Poof right, as the king has forgotten about her, about that bright light, and Poof planned to exploit that. Albeit the king noticed his hidden intention, the king that has fought death and came back stronger than ever with his ability to read emotions. This is what makes Miriam terrifying if given enough time, his ability which allows him to gain the abilities of anyone he consumes and use them better, much better. And he gained Yuppie and Poof's abilities with an astonishing improvement over how he and Yuppie were using their ability, and through the emotion sensing ability. He was able to sense the change in Poof and Yuppie, and they would have been dead if not for the loyalty they had shown and is sensing in them. So he gave them a chance. They plan on taking specifically Poof with his ability to split into countless smaller copies of himself, and he happened to have left a few back in the royal palace, but he knows he needs to be careful as that small copy is quite fragile, especially considering how weak he has become after feeding the king his own power. And he spent a while looking for her, yet he made no progress, like something is stopping him from doing so, but he persisted until he noticed someone casually sitting at top of one of the buildings. The man seems to be closing his eyes with no care in the world, paying no attention to what's around him. Poof knows this man, the one with the dangerous ability that could threaten their entire race. The one whose emotions were hard to read, but he was able to anyway. Now, however, Poof wasn't able to sense anything. Not because he's weakened, no, the man before him just appeared to have no emotions. Completely blank, like he isn't allowing anyone to read what's below the cover. That brought a question to Poof's mind: the emotions he read before, the emotions that clearly allowed him to know he isn't lying, were they a lie? The implication of such a thing horrified even Poof, a human who can control his emotions. That's something even his king can do. And even if it was an ability of the human, it still scares him to imagine what other abilities he could have aside from the portal's one. Yet even with the danger the human can present, Poof chose to ignore it. For now, when his king gets here, he'll take care of him. Now he has a more important goal, and he knows he can't do anything against the human with his current state. While Poof has more important things to do, there was always the option of simply killing the human who looks weak yet strong in a short amount of time. If he was confident in doing so, of course. He was scared, so scared in fact the only time he has been more scared than this is when he saw the poor man's rose, not knowing whether his king is alive within that bright darkness or not. He found himself scared of the unknown variable before him. When Poof looks at Yasuo, all he sees is nothing but a harmless weak human. Yasuo's lean appearance doesn't do much to discredit that, and his handsome emotionless expression and facial features don't as well. However, deep within, just looking at the absent-minded human sitting casually on the roof brings terror to his bones, the human that looks completely different than how he looked before, almost like his previous appearance was but a facade. A facade he used to make him take a specific course of action, and that horrified him. So Poof decided to change directions and go look elsewhere until he gets his power back. His eyes darkened as he started flying away, not because of the darkness of the night or a shadow casting its spell on him, but on hatred. The hatred directed towards the punny human that made him feel this way, which made him feel like a bug. A feeling someone of his stature shouldn't feel. After all, how can he call himself the royal guard of the king if he felt this way? So he flew away muttering to himself, such Offense to the king can't be allowed. If I feel like a punny bug, then does the king have a bug as his guard? No. Mark my word. I will definitely kill Y. Eh? The muttering seems to turn to screams as he got far away enough for no one to hear him, like he's scared of the human hearing his words of hatred only. He was whispering, and only Yasuo is allowed to whisper, so when someone breaks that rule, one needs to be cautious as no whisper could escape his strange eyes. And so Poof found himself in an entirely different location before he could react. Well, the truth of the matter is that there was nothing to react to. He has no idea what actually happened. He was just flying, then he found himself in this place. It seems this day isn't his lucky day, and as he'll come to find out, it's his unluckiest day facing Yasuo that no longer has a leech. The leech Yasuo placed on himself is no longer necessary. His goal is already fulfilled, and his next goals don't need him to do much. He just needs time, a lot of time, so his next plan is simply to make that time shorter while exploring the Dark Continent. And to explore such a dangerous place, he needs preparation. He needs to be stronger as someone as cautious as he wouldn't go otherwise. And he happened to have finished most of his preparations except one. He just needs to collect the last pieces, the key pieces of the puzzle, before doing some research, then become something else. Poof was simply stunned, then horrified, looking at the man next to him, then pure horror noticing he can't move. His eyes moved around, noticing that it's the exact same building he saw the human on, and the latter didn't change his position at all. His eyes remained closed with an emotionless expression on his face. You hate me, huh? Well, you're right, I just can't help but see you like a bug. A smart yet dumb bug. It wouldn't have mattered, but you really let your emotions of hatred go, like you want everyone to know and notice. This is something that could be considered a disadvantage, emotions if not controlled, and you seem to suck at it, which is an embarrassment considering your ability to sense emotions. Yasuo muttered calmly without missing a bit, and Poof heard that strange whispers clearly, the whisper that almost made him lose his cool, lose his usually calm composure, but terror overwhelmed him as he noticed something in Yasuo's words. How do you know about that ability? Just sleep, uttered Yasuo, and before Poof can say anything, he blacked out. Well, only this copy as well as all the other copies within the royal palace lost consciousness, leaving the original form, who is far away. Meanwhile, at the same time, Miriam is flying at an incredible speed with a small Poof and Yuppie hanging to him. In their weakened state, it would have taken much more time to reach the palace, which is their destination, so Miriam took the job flying at a speed much faster than they could ever do. Until he stopped flying, hovering high in the air. He seems to be thinking of something for a bit before turning around, looking at Poof with his emotionless eyes, Poof who is biting his lips, holding back the rage and hatred he's feeling, as well as terror, something Miriam noticed, so he simply asked. Chapter 135. Until he stopped flying, hovering high in the air. He seems to be thinking of something for a bit before turning around, looking at Poof with his emotionless eyes, Poof who is biting his lips, holding back the rage and hatred he's feeling, as well as terror, something Miriam noticed, so he simply asked. Are you going to tell me? Tell me about those emotions you started letting out a while ago? The anger and hatred I can sense from you that only got stronger. Also, what's scaring you to that degree? That left Yuppie stunned as he turned his head, looking at the blood coming down Poof's mouth as a result of the latter biting his mouth too hard, and the apparent strange expression on his face, like he's holding something inside, holding those emotions inside. Holding the fear that has only become stronger, seeking to overwhelm him, fear of the human who was able to somehow make every copy of his within the palace and several miles around blackout at the same time. But there is that opposite feeling that managed to hold that fear from affecting him too much, the feeling of hatred and anger directed towards that human. No. Towards every human. Poof, even with all the feelings seeking to overwhelm him, completely knew he needed to speak calmly before the king, and that's exactly what he did. An enemy, a strong enemy, just did something to every copy I left near and in the royal palace. I know the copies aren't dead, but I can't sense anything from them, nor can I control them. It's like the connection between me and them has become vague, not allowing me to do anything. No change was noticed in Miriam's expression as he instead turned around ready to continue flying, though he remarked before doing so, "An enemy that can make you afraid to this degree, huh?" That remark only worked to set Puss's rage and hatred even further, swearing to himself to let the human and every other human taste his wrath as he uses them as meat while turning the useful ones into mindless animals under his manipulation. Only, can he? On the other hand, Yasuo remained seated in his spot, just enjoying the light nice breeze pushing his dark hair and leaving a nice touch on his face. The man didn't seem to care about the monster coming towards him, nor did he care about the monster's guard who has a deep hatred towards him. He appears as if he has no burden on his shoulders, like he has no care in the world. Just relaxing. But while Yasuo appreciates relaxing from time to time, that doesn't mean he just relaxes, because he can do other things at the same time, especially if those things don't bother him. Just like at this moment, while relaxing atop the building, his invisible strings are doing what he wishes for him under his perfect manipulation. The invisible threads that set out to consume the whole island, making every inch of it within his sight. He can create portals as long as the destination is within his vision, so with all the arrowy threads around the large island. That gives him almost instant passage to anywhere in it, and he happened to have set his eyes on some preys. The last of their species aside from the king and the royal guards. Of course, this is only within the known world, as there could be more within the mysterious land called the Dark Continent. The preys that he allowed to live previously until they grew stronger for him to harvest them, and the seeds have grown beautifully into a full-grown tree so full of the miraculous energy called Nen. Time to collect. So all around the island, an interesting scene was happening, yet none has seen it. Not even the victims of the invisible strings knew what happened. It just that no one will ever hear about them again, as they remained prisoners in the mysterious deadly maze, never to leave or even wake up before hearts beat no more. Black and white are colors Yasuo can clearly see, and he can also see all the other colors and can differentiate which of which means something. He can clearly see good and bad and all that comes in between, but such colors don't affect his judgment at all. What interests him, he must have it and it must be done, so it's only natural he ignores the fact that there are bad chimera ants, but there are good ones as well. Ones with pure intentions and a good heart, and ones with vile intentions and tainted hearts. That made no difference in his eyes. The life of such people was purely dependent on his whims, and if they picked his interest and enter his line of sight, so they could only consider themselves unlucky for being born in the same world as him. They should consider themselves unlucky as Yasuo was born within their world, and he happened to have the ability to hear every whisper all over the known world, and his vision enveloped the whole known world as well, and it's working its way to envelop the entirety of the Dark Continent. Really, just how unlucky can one be? So the world noticed the disappearance of many. The disappearance of good chimera ants was easily noticed, though not many disappeared, but there was nothing anyone could do about it, as no one knew what really happened. They just disappeared. Among the chimera ants that disappeared, the most important ones which Yasuo values significantly are but a few, as he only took the ones that are actually useful or have something that distinguishes them from the rest. Names such as Leal, who has an interesting ability similar to Krollo's which allows him to borrow others' abilities although significantly less useful. There is also one of the most important ones, a chimera ant who proclaimed herself as the queen, calling the previous one a failure. She also has an interesting ability which Yasuo plans on researching thoroughly. By stinging a human, this chimera ant can transform them into a grotesque human-animal hybrid who becomes utterly loyal to her. Zazan, one of the squadron leaders. And another chimera ant he took who could be considered one of the good ones, one of the most interesting ones, Melioron, also one of the squadron leaders, and what distinguishes him from the rest is his ability. While holding his breath, Melioron can use an advanced form of his invisibility, becoming completely undetectable by the sight, hearing, smell, touch, preternatural perception or N. His presence is hidden to the point where others would simply overlook him in proximity without being consciously aware of it. Lastly, Gyro, the founder and former king of NGL. As a human, he suffered an abusive childhood at the hands of his alcoholic father. That experience led him to have the ambition to spread evil throughout the world. An intelligent, dangerous man that happened to have experienced something interesting, experienced being reborn as a chimera ant after being eaten by the queen. After being reborn as a chimera ant, his strength of mind and unquenchable hatred for humanity allowed him to retain his personality and memories, which prevented the queen from controlling him, thus giving him what true power really is, the power that'll allow him to achieve his desire, destroying the world and erasing humanity from existence. Gyro of course felt that power and knew what it could do. The possibility of achieving his dream gave birth to something foreign to him within his dark heart, hope. That bright light called hope finally lit the world he sees ablaze. Really, how unlucky can one be? Yasuo saw him and his interest was piqued. These are abilities that interest him, so he didn't shy out and took what he wants with no care of what others might think if they find out, or the fact that a few people, if provided with a few pieces of information, can come to the conclusion he's responsible for their disappearance, though only a few people can do so. One of them happened to be the vice president of the Hunters Association, Pariston Hill. Yet Yasuo just didn't care. His interest in the known world is waning as he started setting his eyes towards the dark unknown world called the Dark Continent, where his next phase of plans will take place, where mysteries and wonders lie, and he plans to unveil that curtain. So he just waited while collecting a few more things, waiting for the last things and the most important thing he needs. Miriam and the royal guards. Everything else was but a mere appetizer. The king and the royal guards are the main course as well as the dessert, the last part of the meal. So he waited for their arrival while doing the things that need to be done in the meantime, such as getting Pito's disfigured body, which has almost been destroyed by the revenge-fueled Gon. All specifically for their complex and superior DNA, much superior to humans, the result of the queen's natural ability giving birth to the combination of her DNA, humans, magical beasts, and normal beasts as well, not just combination but producing something much better. Evolution, Chapter 136. All specifically for their complex and superior DNA, much superior to humans, the result of the queen's natural ability giving birth to the combination of her DNA, humans, magical beasts, and normal beasts as well, not just combination but producing something much better. Evolution. That is his goal from his previous. A simple dream of breaking his limits, genetic and mental ones. And he found he has limits in this life as well, much higher than limit than his previous life, but a limit nonetheless, and he plans on getting rid of it. Yasuo simply wants to evolve. He just doesn't like the feeling of those limits holding him back, so he planned from his first year in this world, planned to break those limits, fulfilling his dream. And he already knows how to do so, something he has been studying since his previous life, and he prepared well for the past years for the day he starts the transformation. The years of research and curiosity satiating results lead to exactly what he wanted and better. So Yasuo just waited as the king made his way towards the royal palace, the destined meeting with the king, destined by Yasuo's words. The king who has become stronger than ever, much stronger than before, so strong in fact that the previous nuclear bomb would hardly affect him now. Of course, that's only if we set aside the darkness within the bomb, the poison within. Miriam flew through the sky with what he's thinking remains a mystery as he remained silent without any change in his expression throughout the flight after noticing Poof's change of emotions and hearing what he said until the royal palace came within his vision. It was only at that moment he asked, "That human? Describe him." That got Poof out of his daze. He remained absent-minded the entire way, hold in his dark uncontrollable emotions. Yasuo's last words to him kept ringing in his mind, haunting him, the whispers that'll forever remain in his mind if he was to survive. He was sitting on top of a building wearing black clothes, and he has dark hair as well. He is also easily noticeable because of his eyes. His eyes' colors are different, with one being black and the other silvery. described Poof, hardly keeping his cool even after the minutes that passed during the flight, and Miriam noticed that peculiarity, bringing curiosity to his mind. What could the human have said for Poof to be affected this much and showing so much hatred and fear towards a human? Curiosity about another human aside from the one that almost killed him, though he doesn't remember much about what happened. He came to few conclusions, such as the conclusion that one of the humans used some kind of weapon to put him in that state, but he doesn't remember who or how. There is still something that stuck to his mind, the word fear. It felt like it's not a foreign term to him, like he felt what that word mean, but he can't remember anything regarding that, and that made him more interested in meeting this specific human. Perhaps the human can answer some of his questions. Miriam thought that for one simple reason: hearing Poof's words seemed to trigger a memory of his, though it remained vague. The memory of three shadows standing at the end of the room as the world darkened around him, while crouching on the ground, and that's all he could remember. However, Miriam got a feeling like the human described is one of those three shadows, so he used one of his new abilities. One he gained after Yuppie and Poof had fed him their own aura and flesh. Gained isn't really a good word to describe it, as create is a better one, but that creation wouldn't have happened if he didn't gain Poof's ability. By combining the abilities inherited from Sha Poof and his own Miriam created his own version of spiritual message. It consists in turning his aura into microscopic particles akin to photons and either deploy them with his in a flash or detach the photons from his body and spread them into the surrounding air. Each photon maintains his aura even if it is separated from Miriam's body. It also allows him to measure the shape, quality, emotion, and other informational content about the things the photons interact with. Basically a much superior version of that can spread with the speed of light, an interesting ability indeed, especially since its range is much wider than Yasuo's control domain. But while Miriam's ability spread at the speed of light, Yasuo's domain simply appears whenever he wants it to. Yasuo's domain doesn't travel until it enveloped his maximum domain range. No, his domain simply appears ignoring the limitation of space or time, true instant domain, and it doesn't matter how large the domain is, it will always remain instant, just like Yasuo wished. His most prized and core ability is more broken than it seems, and that's leaving aside the fact it's not just a simple domain, it's a domain created with the goal of absolute control within, so Miriam really never and will never understand the creature his photons just detected. At this point in time, Miriam is hovering several miles from the royal palace, and while he can see the overall shape of the palace from his place, he couldn't see the human Poof talking about, and he didn't bother asking Poof about the human's last location, and so instead, he just spread his consisting of numerous photons directed towards the palace's direction. That allowed his photons' range to become much larger, and with the speed of light, his photons made contact with the palace almost instantly in the span of no more than 39 microseconds, and it was at the same moment he sensed the person. He was able to easily find him due to the fact Yasuo never moved from his place, remaining seated on the same building with his eyes closed, and the fact no one is actually within the palace, completely vacant. Not even one of the chimera ants is there, nor were the lines of thousands of hypnotized peoples there. The royal palace appeared to be like an abandoned, broken-down monument with signs everywhere to what has happened here, letting history remember the number of lives that fell here in the middle of fighting the uninvited guests. A strange scene indeed, considering how many people were there, yet here we are, and Miriam came to the natural conclusion that the human is responsible for the strange event. He was of course right. Yasuo no longer needed for the event to continue. He already got almost all that he was here for, so he decided to end it, and he was able to do so easily. Something Netero knew but couldn't really ask for it directly because he also knew what kind of person Yasuo is, and he noticed some strange events happening in this area of the world. That led him to believe Yasuo has some plans regarding the island, and while he got to know some of them later down the line, Netero knows that those are the only things Yasuo didn't care if known. So Netero did what he would do if Yasuo didn't exist, but hired him to make sure the job is done, to make sure the threat disappears from the face of the earth by the end of the day. And while he saw the possibility of winning if working together with Yasuo against the king, he wanted to test himself one last time and leave the choice of saving him or not in the hands of Yasuo, as he is sure Yasuo noticed the bomb within his stomach and he knows Yasuo can easily save him if he wished. So the question remains, did Yasuo save him or not? No clues have pointed out the option of saving him is what he took, but again, Yasuo to a certain extent is a mystery and he will only let people know what he allows them to, so the world will assume Netero died with the explosion until proven otherwise. Once Miriam detected his target's location, he started flying again exactly in his direction while also noting a few things to himself, something Poof notices a while ago when his small clone saw the human. The human's emotions don't appear to exist, or so his photons told him, but he also detected something deeper at play, something Poof couldn't detect. His emotions are there even with how faint they are, they just seem to be hiding under his feet waiting for the human to give his commands. They exist, they're just under his complete control. With Miriam's speed, it only took a bit more than a minute for him to reach Yasuo, who didn't seem to react to the Chimera Ants King hovering before him with Yuppie and Poof hanging onto him. He didn't react even with their presence being as apparent as the bright shining sun in the middle of a clear day, especially Poof, whose feelings of hatred were held back no more as he released them fully towards the puny human casually sitting before his king, as if even someone with his king's statue doesn't deserve his respect, and that fueled his hatred even more. But really, how unlucky can one be? Chapter 137. He didn't react even with their presence being as apparent as the bright shining sun in the middle of a clear day, especially Poof, whose feelings of hatred were held back no more as he released them fully towards the puny human casually sitting before his king, as if even someone with his king's statue doesn't deserve his respect, and that fueled his hatred even more. But really, how unlucky can one be? Quite unlucky it seems. Poof was facing Yasuo after all. Miriam just observed the human who remained seated, no minding the strange visitors. He observed his calm, unwavering aura that looks constant without any movement whatsoever, the technique called Ten taken beyond perfection. This is the case with every Nen technique. Under Yasuo's control, they were taken beyond what's possible. A state of beyond perfection is what he has over his Nen as long as it's within his domain, and even outside of his domain, his control is perfect. Miriam observed the human, noting he can get only a bit of information by observing him, and even his photons don't give him much. The human before him is but a blank book with only one page written on, and the size of the book is unknown, and most of the information on that page came from Poof, who told him of what he knew about the human. Yasuo opened his eyes, having finished some business elsewhere, and looked at the completely different Chimera Ants King hovering in the air not far from him. His domain working on full power, detecting anything interesting about the king, whose aura has become significantly bigger, and even his physical capabilities seem to be on a whole other level. The extremely dense muscles that scream of power are a testification of that. Miriam was the one who opened his mouth first, stating something strange. Have we met before? The king was observing the human's expression closely. Perhaps he can get something from that, but no change of expression was noticed on the man's face. Instead, the latter wondered, "Oh, you lost your memory. So you do know me. Tell me about the circumstances of our meeting. I feel like there is something I should remember there." Miriam didn't answer, but his response was enough to answer the question, and directly after that, he made an order. Not a question, but an order that made it seem like the human in front of him have no choice but to answer. Yasuo was amused hearing the order, but remained cautious nonetheless, just like he would normally behave, even if he is 100% sure he is safe. He will still be cautious, and even if he saw the future, there will always be that just in case in his mind. So even though he already used that same ability to look into the future and looked into the future again, making sure of something and knowing doing so will result in the future he wants as he saw previously, while also serving as a form of assurance to himself. And the interesting part about it is that all Miriam felt is a movement in Yasuo's aura that happened instantly, but he saw nothing. This stands upon a simple principle. Even though the dark purple crow is seeable, if it is used making the crow invisible, other Nen users will need to use Gyo to see it. That and the fact the process was instantaneous. The dark crow appeared hidden behind Yasuo's back, blinked then disappeared. The process was that fast due to a simple reason: the fact that the small dark purple crow is the construct he chose as Zero Vision is what made it possible. He can choose one construct form which will be called Zero Vision. That particular form will ignore the limitation: the bigger the construct the lower the added power will be, but the small the overall size of Zero Vision relative to Yasuo's overall size, the more powerful the Vision Eye will be. The increase in Vision Eye's power isn't infinite, as the increase in power will stop when the form is 10 times smaller than Yasuo's size. Yasuo can change Zero Vision's form only once a month. He selected the Dark Crow form as Zero Vision with its small size as to make Vision Eye ability stronger based on the advantage of the construct being small. Of course he prioritizes seeing the future, so he chose that form above anything else. And there is another hidden advantage of Zero Vision form: it can be instantly summoned and unsummoned, allowing him to see the future instantly. He saw the future that would have happened and the future that'll happen due to him using his ability right now again. Yasuo slowly stood up with an air of serenity surrounding him, making Poof tense, since the human answering could mean he will tell Miriam about Komugi. At this point he isn't as scared of the man due to the king's power, a power he knows too well, even though he only saw the tip of the iceberg, and that was enough to give him some peace of mind, only to be broken by Yasuo's casualness in such situation. Against Poof's expectation, Yasuo just lightly smiled as he stood up, saying something that stunned Poof and Yuppie and surprised Miriam a bit. "My mission was just to make sure every dangerous chimera ant is eliminated, and well, the mission is pretty much done, leaving only the 3 of you." Yasuo's last words seemed to have the highest effect on the 3, especially Poof, who realized something. As far as his vision and sense can go, he wasn't able to sense anyone, nor is he able to sense any of the cocoons he made, especially the ones he left in the open. They disappeared, something he ignored due to the astray emotions muddling his state of mind. "There is also the most important thing," he said: "only the 3 of us are left, the king, Poof, and Yuppie," meaning Pito is dead. "And every other chimera ant's hybrids he made." Such a notion is driving him mad, especially seeing how casual the man is after all he did to destroy his plans. Really, how unlucky can one be? Because Yasuo's next words have set their eyes on breaking his mind. Quite unlucky it seems, as Yasuo uttered those words, the wise sinister words that set out the sequence of events he desires. "It seems my services aren't really needed anymore. You 3 are already dead. Less than an hour for you 2 and few hours for you. Humans are kind of terrifying, huh?" simply remarked Yasuo, insinuating to Yuppie and Poof then Miriam respectively. The words that baffled the 2 royal guards, not giving them much time to comprehend Yasuo's previous words. They slowly turned their heads towards their king, not willing to believe such a harsh possibility, and tears started coming down their face once they saw their king not responding. Instead, he stayed silent without refuting the truthful and accurate words. Such a sequence of tragic news was a blow to their mind, eliminating the glimmer of hope that just started to shine within their heart after seeing their king is still alive. Their rays of hope destroyed lit up burning desperation within their hearts. Miriam looked at the human that started walking away, with a portal appearing not far from him as if he wants to walk into it, ignoring his orders. The king wasn't that puzzled on how the human knows, he simply attributed it to an ability of his, but hearing his words. Miriam picked something else, the fact that the human knows a lot, and he also saw something else, Poof's desperation, and he was able to predict his next course of action easily. "Komugi," uttered Poof in a tone of hatred towards the man before him, and added directly after, ignoring Miriam's stunned expression as his memories started coming back, giving light to the darkness of the night around him, bringing those bright various colors to his dark world. "The last time I saw her, he was in the room. He probably took her somewhere, so I'm sure he knows her location. Also, please consume me. If you get stronger, perhaps you won't die, so since I'm dying anyway, please use me as a last measure," pleaded the intelligent royal guard, knowing full well Miriam can read him like a book. Aside from the true devotion and loyalty he's feeling for the king and the reason he is ready to do what he's doing, there is another feeling guiding him for his current actions. The feeling of hatred towards the human before him, hatred so overwhelming it severely affected his reasoning, but even with that, his main drive remains his loyalty to the king and his hope he can survive. Miriam was easily able to read Poof, knowing all his intentions well, but he also knew Poof didn't lie, meaning the human knows Komugi's location. He lifted his hand slightly, pointing towards Yasuo while saying to Poof, "Not needed." Then he used an ability he acquired after absorbing Yuppie, the ability to fire explosive blasts of aura from his arm. A single one carries enough power to severely damage a large rock formation. An attack of such strength is making its way towards Yasuo, who seems to be taking his time to go through the portal, something Miriam noticed, allowing him to come to the conclusion Yasuo wants him to. Chapter 138. Then he used an ability he acquired after absorbing Yuppie, the ability to fire explosive blasts of aura from his arm. A single one carries enough power to severely damage a large rock formation. An attack of such strength is making its way towards Yasuo, who seems to be taking his time to go through the portal, something Miriam noticed, allowing him to come to the conclusion Yasuo wants him to. Yasuo simply disappeared, evading the destructive blast of aura, with the portal disappearing as well, allowing the blast to head to another target far in the front. Another building in the distance, putting it to rubbles, though something that could easily be noticed is the fact this blast is nowhere as destructive as the one he used previously. His goal isn't to kill Yasuo after all, and since he doesn't really know the human's level of power, he decided to fire a blast that's not that weak nor is it that strong, but fast enough to hit almost anyone except someone with a teleportation ability like him, and his recovered memory didn't tell him much about the person. "Can you tell me? Since I'm dead anyway, you shouldn't have any problem just letting me know of her location. Also, what do you want? You seem to want me to do something, and you should realize such tricks won't work on me, so talk." Throughout the conversation, the king's expression never changed, only his expression became calmer after hearing Komugi's name, recalling his memories. And since he already noticed the fact he's dying, his interest in the world basically disappeared, as all that was left in his mind is that shining beacon within the dark tunnel. He just wants to meet her one last time. He also noticed Yasuo's strange behavior that's too obvious to miss. The human could have left at any moment, simply teleporting away, yet he took his time like he's waiting for something. But the king is also ready. If the human before him didn't answer, if the human didn't let him know Komugi's location, or if he has even a hint of suspicion that Komugi is hurt, then he'll have to use force, or if she's dead. Yasuo, who has appeared just a bit away from his previous location, smiled before saying something strange. "Actually, what I want you to do is quite simple. I want you to consume them just like they said, and I also want you to consume several of these," he explained while bringing what looks like a silver metallic syringe made specifically for the king not long before. Made from the same indestructible material he named Yazium when he was creating his lab, once he showed the string he directly threw it back into the portal, which has disappeared after. The calm quiet air around them started to slowly change as Miriam simply looked at the human who seems to be looking down on him. The audacity to treat him like a mere toy annoyed even him, even when he has no interest in fighting at all, especially considering he knows more about him than he should. So he spoke in the same calm manner without a change in his expression as the dark purple aura of the king unleashed itself to everything around, affecting the surroundings, bringing chills to even Poof and Yuppie. Not being interested in fighting doesn't mean I won't fight you, nor does it mean I will comply with such demands. The king narrowed his eyes as his royal killing intent was unleashed, with the hidden vile malicious Ren being released as well, threatening to consume the whole royal palace, affecting everything around him, yet his expression remained forever unchanging as he looked down on Yasuo like a god looking down on the puny humans and other lowly creatures beneath his feet. His enormous aura started sipping into the cracks within space, trying to destroy all that's around him, and only then did he state, "Me not being interested in fighting doesn't mean you can disrespect me or look down on me. I hold no good feelings towards you, so choose your words carefully. And even though I fought the other human to a draw, that was the previous me, so how strong you are matters not to me, just tell me where she is and you won't have a problem with me. This isn't a request, this is an order." Hearing that, Poof couldn't help but grit his teeth, because that means the human can walk away alive while he's destined to die. After all the human did, he wants him dead, miserably so. And even if he didn't get to see the human's last moments, it doesn't matter as long as he knows he will be dead, not able to enjoy what could have been a happy life. His hatred that has spurted from something small, spurted from his ego as a royal guard being hurt, but his king doesn't seem to have an interest in doing so. In fact, he doesn't seem to be interested in anything aside from Kamugi, but if the human refused to answer his question, then he will get himself killed, and that's something Poof is anticipating. The small smile never left Yasuo's face, the malicious Ren intent didn't faze him even one bit. He knows the main meal and dessert is more than enough to achieve what he wants, to achieve perfection, but that's not just what he wants now, is it? No, he wants more. His greed set its eyes on what's beyond perfection, and he prepared too much just to achieve that. The liquid within the syringe is proof of that. A combination of his research about genetics and the mysterious inscriptions lead to something fascinating never seen before and is unlikely to ever be seen again. His research over the mysterious inscriptions that became mysterious no more has reached a whole new level. His research never stopped. He started studying Greed Island thoroughly and expanding on what he found, and the results were exactly what he expected. Boundless is the word he could describe the description in. Their potential is infinite in the right hands. The inscriptions he became able to make are simply astonishing, and he found a way to combine that with his research over genetics. A simple yet complex way only he's capable of, though he was only able to produce what he can call a perfect result previously when he was using the debt collector ability. The kind of power he had allowed him to perform miracles, as not only was he creating his lab at that moment, he was also researching the most important thing, and the result was the silver liquid, and he has been looking forward to what Miriam consuming it will result in with his miraculous innate ability and specialist ability. The result was certainly fascinating in Yasuo's eyes, a phenomenal result that brought a happy smile on his face, the exact result he wanted because he didn't want to risk the deadly poison within Miriam to be defeated. The king has to die by the end of the day. The result of the liquid being injected will just stall the process for a few more hours. The human that truly stands atop of the known world, a monstrous human that was born within them, wasn't someone who could be intimidated, nor did the king's malicious intent have any effect on him as he just uttered his next words calmly. "You also seem to misunderstand something. The human you fought, Netero, me and him aren't on the same level, so even though I can clearly see you became stronger, I still see an extremely high chance of winning against you, so what I request wasn't really a request. Well, it's a request you have no choice but to accept if you want to see the girl." Yasuo of course knows such words will only hurt the king's ego and will get him nowhere. He is the king after all, and a strong one at that, with an arrogance befitting of his stature, so of course, he won't bow down no matter what Yasuo said, even if he knows Yasuo's true strength. The only thing that can make Miriam hesitate is his light in the middle of darkness, the white butterfly called Kamugi, but to know that he needs to do something he doesn't want to do. Something that could kill him, because how can he trust Yasuo before him? What if what's inside the syringe will only make him die faster? Hesitation. Yasuo's next words eliminated. "So how about this, we'll fight. If you win, I'll directly teleport you to the girl's location without requesting anything from you, but if you lose, you'll do as I say, then I'll teleport you to her location. In either case, you win the most, so what do you think?" All the time thinking the king needed before coming to the most logical choice is a second, and only then did he nod. "I accept, but the fight can only go for 5 minutes, the one who appears to be winning in that time span is the winner, because as you know, I don't have much time left." Yasuo nodded, already expecting those words. Then he advised the king as he started floating up in the air with his dark hair hiding the bright moon far behind him. I advise you to consume them both before we started, else you won't have that great of a chance. No need for souk, uttered the king. However, he didn't have the chance to finish before. Chapter 139. Yasuo nodded, already expecting those words. Then he advised the king as he started floating up in the air with his dark hair hiding the bright moon far behind him. I advise you to consume them both before we started, else you won't have that great of a chance. No need for souk, uttered the king. However, he didn't have the chance to finish before he was sent flying due to the massive purple hand that appeared out of nowhere. A hand screaming of pure danger and power, seeking to vanish anything in its way and creating a sonic bomb that thundered across the royal palace. Meruem was genuinely stunned, not being able to react, facing the hand quite similar to the hands he faced before. Quite similar to Netero's ability, but also completely different, because even though he became stronger, so strong in fact he would have been able to kill Netero instantly and his statue ability would be useless. That's just how stronger he has become, yet he found himself faced with a similar situation, except it's a more dangerous one. All the strength he has gained seemed useless, like he has never gained it in the first place. The dark purple hand seemed to break the laws of space, appearing right next to him with an unmatched speed, hitting him. And it actually hurts, even with how strong his body has become and how monstrous his aura pool is. It hurts in contrast to how he felt facing Netero. This human and Netero are really on a whole other level. He was sent for about 100 meters before he controlled his enormous wings to balance himself in the air. Then he looked at the human, who is also floating in the air with something strange also floating behind him. A strange dark purple form, a facial structure similar to Yasuo, though the only thing on its face is a pitch black vertical eye taking a significant portion of the space of the face. A lean but muscular body structure. The most interesting thing, however, is the 6 arms the construct has. Extremely long arms reaching a length of 50 meters, which is strange considering the construct's height is only about 30 meters, though the construct only consists of the upper part of the body without having any legs. And something Meruem noticed clearly, as the only thing connecting Yasuo and the construct is 3 purple threads. Meruem decided to target that or Yasuo, as those are the only weak points he can see, and he's right, this is a hidden weakness of the vision construct. If the 3 threads are destroyed, then the construct will disappear. Of course, those 3 dark purple threads are extremely strong, not as strong as the rest of the construct, but strong nonetheless, and Yasuo made this weakness simply to make the construct stronger. The more risks there are, the stronger Nen abilities become. However, Yasuo allowed that weakness to exist for one simple reason, because it is almost impossible to exploit. He has an arsenal of abilities that support each other perfectly, creating an undestroyable barrier, a barrier Meruem will have to break through, and he will see just how indestructible it is. Meruem also noticed something interesting. He noticed a bubble appearing with its outline shining in purple light. This is Yasuo's amplification domain, as he created it with a range of about 300 meters, sacrificing the rest of his domain. That range got extended to 500 meters as his left eye started shining in scarlet light. Yasuo did so simply to be able to sense space clearly and enter a state of near invisibility. As for the purple outline of the domain, Yasuo simply didn't care if someone noticed it. He added that risk to make the sub-ability stronger, and he doesn't regret it one bit, because that made his amplification within the amplification domain much higher. Yasuo, who simply appeared to be floating with his right eye completely blank, like he can't see, while his left one is shining in a scarlet light due to activating the Scarlet Eye's ability, a simple ability that allows him to strengthen his specialist abilities. Floating doesn't appear to be the right word to describe him, as he simply appeared to be static in the middle of the air, making no movement whatsoever except the faint breathing. Breathing that's only possible due to his control domain manipulating himself to do so. After all, he does lose his ability to control most of his body when using the vision ability. Meruem observed his every action carefully, waiting for Yuppie and Poof to gain some distance after he ordered them to do so, not giving them any other choice. Only a few seconds passed before the king decided to start attacking, not willing to go easy on the human at all. he used his full power trying to finish the fight as soon as possible. However, he can't, and he knows that. He knows he just needs to be on the winning side until the 5 minutes mark to pass and he will be the winner. He knows from Yasuo's first attack just how hard it's going to be to actually succeed in reaching the human before him. He wasn't able to react to the attack not just because of his surprise, because that's not something that can hold someone like him. He wasn't able to react because of the attack's speed. He was able to track the hand's movement but wasn't ready to evade. Chimera Ant's strongest suit will always remain their broken physical capabilities that are supported by their Nen. Uvogin wasn't strong just because of his aura pull and proficiency in enhancement, it was also because of his already strong physical capabilities that got enhanced even further by Nen. That is what Chimera Ants have, physical capabilities that can make most Nen users' abilities useless. And the way the king is right now, he can just remain standing without even using Nen, and no Nen user will be able to hurt him unless some special abilities are used, and even then, the abilities need to be strong enough to affect him. That of course doesn't apply to Yasuo, whose Nen proficiency is rivaled by none. He truly stands at the top of what human beings can do. The king's ability allowed him to evolve even more than he already has. The body that was barely damaged in his fight with Netero became much stronger, to the point one can wonder, will the same bomb be actually able to hurt him in his current state? Yet Yasuo was able to actually make him feel pain, no matter how small that feeling was. The combination of several things allowed for that to happen. The fact that the vision construct has Yasuo's physical strength, which is an important thing considering how strong it is. And the fact that when using the ability, the construct is considered his real body, allowing him to output aura through it, which allows him to enhance the construct through Nen even more, and that says a lot considering his proficiency in enhancement and basically every other category. The most important thing is what the construct is made of. Aaron, in a material he transmutes his aura into, so light yet so strong, his transmutation ability. When one transmutes aura into something, that doesn't mean his transmuted aura will only be as strong as that thing. It all depends on how much proficiency one has in transmutation and in the ability. Yasuo was able to take his Aaronin ability quite far, becoming even stronger than the element he just made, and even the whole construct is lighter than a feather, and that's what the construct is made of. That combined with the risks of the ability makes the construct even stronger. And that especially applies to its speed. Yasuo can control it like it's his own body, like naturally controlling his own muscles, allowing its speed to be much faster than sound, surpassing Mach 10, which is due to its lightweight. That lightness property also allows one other thing. Aside from his natural control, Yasuo also uses his control domain to control the construct, making its already astonishing speed much faster with its lightness, basically providing almost no resistance to his control. However, there is something Meruem didn't consider. The greatest thing about Yasuo is his mind. The creative mind that allowed him to construct an arsenal of abilities supporting each other to create something fascinating, and Yasuo is about to show just how far his mind has taken him. The shining light from the moon remained hidden under the construct's large form, casting a massive shadow on a large area in front of him. He is standing in the air at a height perfect to cast a shadow on the king, who is about 100 meters away but is closer to the ground than him. The confrontation has begun, though one couldn't really call it a confrontation. It was an interesting fight nonetheless, where the absolute power of Yasuo was shown. A power that continued to stun Meruem down from the first attack to Yasuo's second, which stunned him even more as the vision construct broke the sound barrier, attacking to its right nowhere near Meruem, which he found strange until Chapter 140. The confrontation has begun, though one couldn't really call it a confrontation. It was an interesting fight nonetheless, where the absolute power of Yasuo was shown. A power that continued to stun Meruem down from the first attack to Yasuo's second, which stunned him even more as the vision construct broke the sound barrier, attacking to its right nowhere near Meruem, which he found strange until he felt the enormous punch send him away from his left. Not being able to react, he noticed a portal appearing in front of the hand, and before he could react, he felt the same pain he felt previously. A combination of the vision construct's speed and his control domain making it faster, then his portal's ability added to the equation makes his level of danger insanely higher than it should be. The human before him is too dangerous. 5 minutes, huh? Remarked Miriam as he stabilized himself in the air. His previous speculations about how the fight will go were based on how he is currently, but that doesn't mean he gave up. No, in fact, he is thinking about what he can become in this few minutes. He already faced a similar situation before against Netero. He couldn't do anything and he really didn't like that. No matter how much light Komugi brought to his heart, something will never change: his ego as the king, his superiority to everything else. That ego is what's driving him to be better than everything else, to be the absolute ruler of everything. He is a specialist, so that obsession allowed him to create the second strongest ability that ever, not far behind Yasuo's control domain. The ability to absorb the abilities and aura of anything he consumes, and now, he plans on using that same obsession to create something equally as powerful for a price, of course. He is also using something else equally as important, his deep desire to go and see Komugi, and he is confident he can naturally create the ability he wants. He's just wondering how fast he can finish it. And he doesn't believe it will take long, especially with the fact that he already started the process during his fight with Netero. Albeit, he didn't have much time to finish it, so he started his spree of attacks while his mind was also focused on his hidden goal. Is it hidden though? The next confrontation was miraculous, to say the least, to the point Yuppie and Poof were extremely stunned as their heads started buzzing because they simply couldn't see anything. They only heard the numerous sound bombs that threatened to make them deaf. Because across the next minute, all they saw is the human remaining static in the air, with the statue's hands appearing a bit illusionary and their king basically being unseeable. But they heard the sound that reverberated throughout the palace, and they saw the whole palace breaking down as well as the ground shattering all around. Earthquakes were being produced every second, shaking every corner of the royal palace and even beyond. And what looked like blasts of pure destructive lava were being fired from all around, only to be seen again being fired back at the one who fired them, who in their view was nothingness. The blasts were fired back at nothing but fired at Yasuo. Of course, they knew the source of the blasts is none other than their king, as that's Yuppie's ability, except in Miriam's hands, it's much more optimized and much stronger. Poof easily came to the immediate conclusion that the blasts were fired back at his king, who Poof can't see, which he attributed to the human's ability to create portals, an extremely dangerous ability. The two were simply stunned that a human actually has the ability to face their king, especially with his current level of power. Seeing the strange puzzling scene before them started to destroy their already strange foreign common sense. The sense that the king is rivaled by none, that he stands at the top of the food chain, yet here they are watching what they considered impossible. In the first minute, the fight was extremely simple, Miriam flying while also using his muscle strength to push his speed higher to point of being able to travel hundreds of meters almost instantly. A speed that only continued to increase as Miriam gained more proficiency in using Nen as well as more control over his massively increased power. Yet nothing has changed. He always ends up facing the massive dark purple hands that either appears from within a portal or just attack him once he reaches a distance of about 50 meters. He easily succeeded in getting out of the purple bubble that is Yasuo's domain, then started attacking using rage blasts towards Yasuo, yet nothing changed. All his attacks get easily sent back to him, yet Miriam's face didn't change one bit. Even with all the heavy bruises that started appearing all over his body, even with the wounds that started appearing due to the destructive hands. Wounds and bruises that disappear in a matter of seconds like they never existed. The king's regeneration abilities reached a whole new level after consuming most of the two royal guards. But the rate at which Yasuo's 6 arms attacked only became faster and faster as more portals started appearing everywhere, even outside of his amplification domain, not giving Miriam any chance to relax, the attacks becoming more aggressive until Miriam found himself being thrown around like a ball through all the hands that started appearing from the portals. He didn't even have a chance to fire the blasts before he found himself being sent away. At this point, The sound bombs became an occurrence that happens repeatedly in a short amount of time. Every piece of glass within and outside of the palace started shattering into smaller and smaller pieces. The buildings has started to shake in a dangerous way, like it's gonna fall at any moment. The partially destroyed buildings are on the brink of being completely breaking down, aside from the places that are mostly destroyed because of Marium falling on them at high speeds. Until even the buildings started shattering and the ground beneath them started opening up like the arrival of the abyss deep within the planet. All this happened because of the sonic bombs produced by Yasuo and the monster's enormous speed that surpassed sound by far, even surpassing the 25 Mach mark. That also resulted in another thing, due to the friction of the air and the massive purple hands that is caused by the simple fact that the air has no time to move out of the hands' way with their speed. The friction causes the 6 massive hands to heat up like any normal material, since the construct is made of aeronin. The aeronin is just the aerogel, albeit much more enhanced and stronger, so it's able to heat up, but the material Yasuo decided to transmute his aura into has a special property he targeted, an interesting yet simple one, an extremely high resistance to heat. So the extremely high temperature the friction caused posed no obstacle for Yasuo. On the contrary, it made the 6 hands much more dangerous as their temperature became higher and higher as they started shining in another color, a yellow-red color that seems to melt everything within close proximity to the 6 arms. An extremely high temperature that surpassed 1500 Celsius, and seeking to burn Marium to a crisp with his blood evaporate into the darkness of the night. Albeit that was quite hard to do with Marium's level of power, but that was enough for the damage dealt to Marium to become much higher, surpassing what his regeneration can do. The temperature started increasing throughout the palace due to the friction there causing all around, to the point the surroundings reaching a temperature enough to create lava throughout the surroundings due to the rocks, rubbles, and even soil burning, a temperature so high it forced the 2 weakened royal guards to retreat even further. Across all of this happening, Marium remained composed without any change in his expression, like all the wounds that have started to become a bit deep didn't affect him, like the fact that he's in a powerless situation matters not to him. Until 1 minute since the start of the fight has passed, that 1 minute was enough to change the scenery around completely, as within miles around him everything was destroyed, even the ground beneath them, a completely foreign scenery than what it once was. Just broken down ground and lava flowing everywhere. Yasuo simply looked at this emotionlessly, knowing the fight is nowhere near its end. He looked at the horrifying yet beautiful scenery with his vertical pitch black eye, because now, he isn't in his own body. No, his body at this moment is the vision construct, a fully activated vision construct that can achieve miracles. It was at that moment that the king uttered a few simple words that have more meaning than what it seems. A deeper meaning that none but the darkness can see, as he let out a small sigh. Ha, it doesn't really matter, does it? I only have few hours to live. After all, I did finish faster than expected, so let's start, shall we? Or is let's finish a better statement? Uttered the king directly after, as he placed another of Yasuo's hands and legs to the ground, completing the collection, 4 pale yet bloody body parts on the ground. Chapter 141. It was at that moment that the king uttered a few simple words that have more meaning than what it seems. A deeper meaning that none but darkness can see, as he let out a small sigh. Ha, it doesn't really matter, does it? I only have few hours to live. After all, I did finish faster than expected, so let's start, shall we? Or is let's finish a better statement? Uttered the king directly after, as he placed another of Yasuo's hands and legs to the ground, completing the collection, 4 pale yet bloody body parts on the ground. The 2 royal guards' comprehension is being challenged to a dangerous level, threatening to burn their brains. They just have no idea what's going on before them. All they saw is lights everywhere as lava appeared, trying to consume all that's around. It has been quite a while since they were even able to see their king, and at this point, even the dark purple construct's 6 arms can no longer be seen. A strange battle indeed. It affected the surroundings, creating earthquakes and lava, changing the scenery completely, yet they still have no idea just what's going Their brain started stalling, trying to comprehend just what's happening and how can a human have this level of power. How can a human be so out of their league? They just couldn't comprehend how stronger he is until they were actually able to see something. And hear something. They heard the king's words and noticed a small movement in his aura, something Yasuo noticed as well. Then it happened, the scene before them slightly changed. Yasuo's body was unmoving until he lost 4 body parts of his instantly. His arms and legs disappeared and all that remains is his still static pale body without his limbs. Those same arms and legs are now next to Miriam, who appeared in another place entirely and placed the last arm he just cleanly cut, or is let's finish a better statement? Befitting of a king as strong as him, his words were of absolute confidence and elegance. It was a statement, not a question, as he already knows he has already won the fight. He's not sure why the human really wants to fight him, because he has noticed that the human's goal isn't just getting him to take that silver syringe and absorb the royal guards. He noticed that the human actually wants to fight him. The patterns Yasuo has shown were too obvious to miss, so he naturally came to that conclusion. Yasuo's goal didn't matter much to the king. He just wants to go on his own way, and the human happened to know where that lies. He also knew he needs something from him, so he'll fulfill his end of the deal, else Miriam will just have to kill him. Of course, he prefers not to do that because of one simple reason. Yasuo has Kamugi and he has hidden her somewhere, and Miriam believes he has a chance of finding her using the ability he just created. An ability that was only possible because of these particular exact circumstances, the fight against the human and the latter's actions and his desires as the king and the sacrifice he made. If even one thing changed, the ability's existence would have been impossible, but even with that, he still doesn't want to just kill the human and look for her himself because of an ability of the human before him. The portal's ability. Just how far is she? How far did he take her? Is she on the other end of the planet, or is she deep beneath the earth? Or is she far above the sky? Miriam just doesn't know the limits of the monstrous human before him, so he prefers not to take the risk. He believes he will win, he knows he will win, for he is the king. However, Yasuo seems to think otherwise. Befitting of the assassin he is, the severed limbs didn't affect him one bit. In fact, not a drop of blood fell down and his expression didn't change at all. This partially due to the fact he can't naturally control his body when using the vision ability, but he can control it with his control domain. But it's also because of the fact he simply felt nothing, nor did he think he'll lose because of this simple occurrence. Yasuo already judged he will win. This is but a mere step back he allowed for a calculated reason. To give the king hope he can actually win, otherwise, the king's action will just destroy his plans, which he doesn't want to see, as well as another more important reason. The 6-armed construct made no more movement after that, as if he has given up, but that couldn't be further from the truth. Yasuo's next whispers are a testification of that, as he controlled his vocal cords and mouth to utter the words. Huh? Have you learned nothing from your previous fight? There is always something more. Something hidden, and if you don't pay attention, you'll regret it. Ants, this is your weakness. Too young. Too inexperienced. Those mumbles, those absolute words that were uttered in a tone of absolute serenity, like what has happened mattered not to Yasuo, like these 4 limbs on the ground changed nothing. Those words reminded him of what Netero said during their fight and what he had experienced during it. Humans always have more within their sleeve. Even with his strange ability, the one that allowed him to cut Yasuo's limbs, he wasn't able to react to what happened next. Before he knew it, he found that the 4 limbs close to him have disappeared, only to appear connected to their original place, though only placed in their place without actually being connected to his body. However, that wasn't for long, because Yasuo started applying his magic with every vein of his getting connected together again, forming the canals in which blood flows to make those limbs usable again. Then he applied the finishing touches as he attacked himself with the use of the vision construct, using the negative rose, starting the healing process. That and the light blue shade that appeared on his skin as the zombie organisms started their work, achieving what's deemed impossible. near-instant regeneration, well beyond what the king can do. And by the way, what you just did, you don't have to hide. I sensed the bubble, so doing that doesn't really matter," advised Yasuo one last time before starting his spree of attacks, albeit much different than the last. Humanity really is scary. No, he is scary, this level of power and abnormality achieved by a human who looks so young. Someone so dangerous that he rivals my strength, I who was born to be the ruler of all, and he didn't even use any weapon as the other human did, but just like he said, I'm young, so if I just had more time, or if I used the time I had. But it doesn't matter, that doesn't change a thing. Your regeneration won't be able to keep up with me, and my goal isn't to kill you. Deep down, however, numerous questions surfaced within the king's mind. How did the human know? How was he able to sense the bubbles? Meruem was so sure Yasuo will have no idea about what he did, yet here we are. However, just as Meruem said, that just doesn't matter. Even if Yasuo was able to sense the bubbles and what he did, if he can't react, then it just doesn't matter. So Meruem released those bubbles. He deployed the numerous white bubbles to spread throughout the palace and beyond. His photons ability, which consists in turning his aura into microscopic particles akin to photons and either deploy them with his N in a flash or detach the photons from his body and spread them into the surrounding air. That same ability is being used now, however there are a few differences, such as the number of photons, which is much smaller than the time he used it previously, and their shape, which has become much bigger, with one photon bubble enveloping Meruem entirely. The strangeness started from that moment as Meruem started using the new ability with absolute confidence of his victory. Yasuo however noticed that and changed his mind from attacking to defending, as all the 6 arms enveloped Yasuo's vulnerable body tightly, not letting even the small particles of light pass through. An indestructible shield, this is how strong the construct has become. Much stronger than the new Yazium element, yet even that wasn't able to stop the king's barrage of attacks. The invisible attacks that seemed to come from everywhere, attacking the hands that protected the vision ability's weakness, those 3 threads at Yasuo's back. Numerous attacks happening, yet even Yasuo wasn't able to track them. In fact, Yasuo isn't even able to sense the king once the latter disappeared. What's happening is simply mind-boggling, because those numerous attacks happened in the span of a millisecond, and all it took is that millisecond to completely obliterate the whole vision construct. A scene similar to the last happened again. Meruem appeared about 100 meters from Yasuo, who is still floating in the air, though the vision construct could no longer be seen behind him, and so are his limbs. Again. His limbs were again beneath the king's feet, then they simply disappeared, leaving drops of blood coming down the king's hands. Comment. Can you regenerate your whole limbs? Chapter 142. A scene similar to the last happened again. Meruem appeared about 100 meters from Yasuo, who is still floating in the air, though the vision construct could no longer be seen behind him, and so are his limbs. Again. His limbs were again beneath the king's feet, then they simply disappear, leaving drops of blood coming down the king's hands. Can you regenerate your whole limbs? Wondered the king after he obliterated Yasuo's 4 limbs to nothingness. So how can the limbless Yasuo connect his obliterated limbs to his body? He can't. His limbs have simply been obliterated to small particles, so unless he can regenerate his limbs, he will have to remain limbless forever. The devil again had no change of expression, remaining static as the same purple construct manifested itself with dark lines appearing all over its arms. After which Yasuo activated the zombie organisms within to start doing their work, make a blue shade appearing all over his skin. The construct attacked Yasuo's body with its absolute fastest speed possible without doing any harm, as even the high temperature didn't do anything to him. In fact, it only made the restoration process faster. That, combined with the zombie organisms and his large aura pool enhancing his already monstrous regeneration, achieved an interesting scene. The scene of his limbs regenerating in a matter of seconds. The purple shining seems to hide Yasuo's body within its veil until the shining disappeared, with Yasuo's spotless and completely healthy body appearing. In fact, He seems to be even wearing new black pants due to his previous one being cut when Miriam took his legs and arms. Yeah, I can. That was actually quite interesting. I'm pretty sure I figured out how your ability works. Quite interesting indeed, though I wonder what you had to sacrifice to make it even possible in the first place. Remarked Yasuo, not seem discouraged by the previous losses at all. He slowly closed his eyes without deactivating his scarlet eye and entered a state of absolute focus. Focused more than he ever had. After all, he has to be focused beyond belief to keep up with the miracle the king has created. The king was just observing the abnormal human before him with interest, not interrupting Yasuo's restoration process at all, and his expression didn't change at all hearing his words, though he wondered, knowing full well that understanding how it works doesn't mean he can react at all. Does that change anything? It changes everything. The moment he said that, Yasuo actually began attacking as the 6 purple hands attacked through several portals towards the king. It was however in vain, as the king again instantly scattered his photons throughout the surroundings and disappearing, after which. And something Yasuo noticed is the fact that the king always retract all the photons when not using the ability, so he instantly came to the conclusion that keeping the ability active has a price or is a condition. A battle with scenes that happens across milliseconds, making that 5 minutes limit look extremely long, as if it will take years for it to pass. That's just how much the fabric of time was distorted in their presence. The speed of light, Miriam didn't know much about it when he was born, but he studied a lot once he arrived at the royal palace of the Republic of East Gorto. Aside from studying Gunji and other similar games, he also studied a few other subjects that piqued his interest. Among those subjects was an article about light. He had read through and learned quite a lot from it. How photons work and their speed, so he naturally came to the conclusion that there is nothing faster than light, and to a certain extent, he is right, at least to the known world. That's a common belief. Yasuo, however, something that can be faster but not really due to speed, something he's planning on using right now. And so, the vision construct's vertical eye started rapidly blinking as Miriam, who by this point is few meters away from Yasuo, so the question remains, how can he react to the speed of light? The answer is simple. The current Yasuo simply can't, but he can do something better. He can predict where Miriam will be. However, that doesn't answer all the doubts. Even if he predicted it and started moving his 6 arms, light is just too fast for that to make any difference. The vision construct's maximum speed is no more than 30 Mach, and that's simply incomparable to the speed of light, so he will need to predict the future for a relatively long span of time to be prepared for it. However, him changing what he would have done is basically changing the future, so Miriam will notice that and change his course of action based on that, meaning, checkmate. A variable exists, one that can make the impossible possible and cause a kind of battle never seen before. The strangest battle to ever happen. Yasuo's control domain. So once Miriam reached that distance from Yasuo, assuming the latter doesn't even know where he is because of his confidence in the speed of light, he noticed something he didn't expect at all. He noticed one of the massive purple hands appearing within his way. Not just that, it appeared within a few micrometers from him, having its maximum speed and momentum as well as the extremely high temperature. Those micrometers wouldn't have been enough for anyone to react, especially considering both Miriam and the hand are shortening the distance, but Miriam was able to easily achieve what could be considered the impossible. The day the world witnessed many impossible things happen, an abnormal day, as even the planet's common sense was being distorted. Miriam seemed to change directions instantly, heading towards another direction without a change in his speed at all, which strange in itself, like the friction with the air have no effect on him, only to be faced with the same phenomena making him narrow his eyes in wonder. Just what is going on with this abnormal human? How big is his bizarre arsenal of abilities? Is there more? Questions the king was forced to face, especially after noticing all the other arms appearing instantly surrounding him. He simply wasn't able to react even with the speed of light. Strange indeed. There is, however, a simple explanation for this, the same reason he created his amplification domain, sacrificing a portion of his normal domain. Space control. the ability that can potentially surpass the speed of light only if combined with other abilities, just like the bizarre arsenal of abilities Yasuo has. Seeing the future continuously and knowing where Meruem will be before manipulating space for the hands to appear within that destination. A simple process that requires countless calculations in a matter of milliseconds no human but Yasuo can do. However, Meruem's ability proved to be stranger than predicted, because almost instantly one of the massive purple hands broke apart, with Meruem moving through the now available hole, escaping the tight barrier of hands, only to again be faced with another hand chopping towards him from about a few micrometers away. The fabric of space was distorted under Yasuo's control because a strange scene was happening. The purple hands, whose source is the vision construct, appeared distorted, as half of the arms was still connected to the construct while the other half was appearing everywhere under his control, and this is how the attacking hands keep appearing everywhere as if they're infinite. The time Meruem takes to destroy one of the hands is enough for Yasuo to create a new one. And that created a strange scene of the hands appearing everywhere, forcing Meruem to change direction continuously and destroy the hands when needed. If Yasuo's control and proficiency over the ability were even a bit lower, he wouldn't be able to reform the hands fast enough, meaning his loss. The next few seconds of the fight were really just a stalemate with no apparent winner, but they didn't stop and continued the fight for another minute, with the fight getting more and more destructive, as if they're becoming stronger and stronger in the middle of the fight. To a certain extent, that's true, because as the fight went on, they gained more experience, with Meruem gaining more proficiency in using his new ability. While Yasuo got more used to controlling space and performing all those calculations within a short amount of time, and repeating the process better and better as his brain started getting used to all the information he needs to process. His years of training his brain to process an astonishing amount of information continuously have helped his brain reach a level never seen in humanity. His brain is the foundation of his control domain, so the larger and stronger his domain becomes, the more forced his brain becomes to evolve, but there is always a limit, one he's planning to break. The 2-minute mark has passed as Meruem appeared outside of Yasuo's domain with his eyes glittering in a bright light, looking at the Zoldyck floating in the sky. Absolutely no pattern I can exploit, huh? I guess. Those sound waves coming out of his mouth only reached a few micrometers from before he started his next course of action. And so, the king looked at Yasuo's head on his hand with a bit of confusion apparent in his purple eyes, confusion over the fact that the human is actually dead. Chapter 143. The 2-minute mark has passed as Meruem appeared outside of Yasuo's domain with his eyes glittering in a bright light, looking at Yasuo floating in the sky. Absolutely no pattern I can exploit, huh? I guess. Those sound waves coming out of his mouth only reached a few micrometers from before he started his next course of action. And so, the king looked at Yasuo's head on his hand with a bit of confusion apparent in his purple eyes, confusion over the fact that the human is actually dead. That is what would have happened in the future Yasuo saw after a sequence of extremely fast events leading to his head being cut. However, he saw that future and acted accordingly. The sequence of actions consisted of a few complex actions Meruem performed almost instantly. Retracting every photon of his, though not completely but to a close distance from him, before starting to concentrate his aura on his hands, which turned into what looked like balls of lava. It looked like a volcano that's about to erupt, destroying everything in its surroundings. The process actually continued for a whole second, with Yasuo allowing him to do what he wants. Creating what looked like massive lava balls, but that's not what it is. This is an enhanced version of Yuppie's Rage Blast, which basically allows him to self-destruct, creating a massive explosion of pure aura. However, Meruem took that 100 steps further, managing to create the Rage Blasts without the need to self-destruct and with a power higher than Yuppie could ever achieve. And so he created 2 highly destructive condensed Rage Blasts on each of his hands, only for those 2 large spheres of pure destructive aura to split into countless smaller spheres. Those spheres moved as per his manipulation, potioning themselves within some of the photons. The number of photons he created is just too big, so even with how many rage blasts there are, they only managed to fill a negligible amount of the photons. The photons that have rage blast spheres within remain static, while the empty ones spread again throughout the surroundings for miles around the royal palace. Let there be light. The moment those calm words were uttered from the king's mouth, the filled sphere started moving at light speed, breaking through space, and this is where those specific photons' strange movement was noticed. The rage blast photons are all heading towards other photons, with none of them having a random direction. Each of them set out to another empty photon, and once they reach it, that specific empty photon disappears. And only then can the loaded photons change direction towards another empty photon. An interesting phenomenon Yasuo noticed previously when observing the king's predicted movement. The movement of the loaded scarlet photons caused a fascinating scene to be seen from hundreds of miles away, as hundreds of thousands of loaded photons started heading towards Yasuo, appearing like large fireflies flying throughout the sky. The combination of so many lights formed what could be mistaken for a scarlet sun. The numerous empty photons everywhere allowed for the loaded ones to have targeted photons that they'll have to go through Yasuo to reach, meaning his death, as the numerous destructive rage blasts detonate against him, obliterating him completely. However, Miriam expected Yasuo to use the purple construct to protect himself, which should be able to protect against some of the blasts. Then he'll change the directions of the loaded ones and take the human's head himself to test a theory of his. And so Miriam started his light speed march towards Yasuo, who is only but a few meters from the oncoming rage blasts that seek to banish him from existence. Yet he made no movement to control space. In fact, at that moment he seemed to be in a state of absolute calmness and serenity, like nothing can faze him. Like at that moment, he became absolute, as if not even the destruction of the universe can faze him or have any impact on him. And so, in the calmest tone imaginable, one that can bring fear and doubt to even the most ferocious predators, Yasuo muttered. "The king, huh? A fitting title indeed, but have you heard of the word invincibility? Or invulnerable? Untouchable? I'm not there yet, but am actually not far. Let me show you an example. Just how long light takes to move a distance of few meters. A negligible time span. What can be called instantaneous movement, yet those calm words were uttered in that instant. Or at least, that's what Miriam thought he heard as he witnessed how close Yasuo has come to a state of invulnerability through a simple action. The king clearly saw the three portals that appeared instantly before starting to distort until they enveloped Yasuo completely, hiding in the darkness within, and all Miriam could see from then on is the round pitch-black sphere floating in the sky with Yasuo and the vision construct hidden within. Invincibility? Miriam witnessed what it could mean as the loaded photons simply went through the portal, appearing more from several destination portals at varying distances. Some only a few several miles away, while others hundreds of miles and even more. This is simply a test from Yasuo to see how far Miriam's control over the ability goes. Thundering explosions sounded throughout hundreds of miles as their confrontation only continued to change the landscape upside down, creating what will be considered the strangest landscape that appeared overnight. "I see, just as I thought, you can see the future." A simple remark from the king, who gathered more than enough evidence to come to that conclusion. Yasuo didn't deny it, as it's quite obvious by this point. Instead, he made his own remark after gathering more than enough information to know exactly what Miriam's new ability is. "Let's see, you create those white spheres with one of them enveloping you completely, then you spread all the other spheres, and only then do you get the ability to move at the speed of light." Well, I don't really think it's the speed of light, but it's not far off. You can only go in straight directions towards other sphere, but you can change your direction, albeit at a strange angle, as you always need a destination sphere to go to. If you reach the destination sphere, the latter will simply disappear, and even if you didn't reach that sphere and changed your destination sphere, that sphere will still disappear, meaning as long as you choose a destination sphere to travel to, that chosen sphere will disappear. And to create those lost spheres again, you have to retract all the spheres before releasing them again, though I don't know what other limit is there for this. You always envelop yourself with one of the spheres, and you did the same to the aura blasts you made, meaning things have to be within the sphere to actually travel at the speed of light, but the only things that can be affected by the sphere and travel at that speed are you and your aura, else, if the air molecules in the spheres traveled at that speed, the moving air will collide with the static air in the atmosphere. The kinetic energy of the moving air will convert to both heat and the kinetic energy of the pushed molecules of air that were static. There will be high pressure in the front and vacuum behind, which will create bombs, not a level of nuclear bombs but a significant one nonetheless. The most important thing, however, is how can think and react accordingly as you move at that speed. The only explanation is that you can think at the speed of light, and when inside the sphere, you aren't affected by the consequences of moving at that speed. I wonder what or how much you sacrificed to create such an ability? Wondered Yasuo to himself, with amusement apparent in his eyes as he looked at Miriam, who is static in the air, allowing him to finish what he has to say, though there is something interesting Yasuo noticed. In contrast to the previous time, this time Miriam didn't retract the spherical photon surrounding him, leading to Yasuo's next conclusion. Also, leaving the ability active have a cost, a hefty cost I presume, yet here you are leaving it active in contrast to the previous times and actually allowing me to casually waste time. You're thinking in lightning speed how to defeat me, aren't you? You're thinking about how you can break my invulnerability? Miriam was indeed doing as such, thinking about how to break the unbreakable barrier before him, the paradox floating before him. And while Yasuo appears to be defenseless at the moment with the spherical portal cancelled, Miriam knows that if he really has a future sight ability, then every action of his is predetermined. And the human before him will act accordingly before he even did anything, and from what he last saw, he can create the spherical portal instantly. However, he noticed a weakness in the ability and analyzed it continually for what appears to be days in his point of view, while in reality, only seconds passed. The bizarre entity before the king, an entity he doesn't know its name. Suddenly he asked, "Your name, what is it?" Yasuo raised his brows before letting out a small smile and answering, "Oh, excuse my rudeness, I'm Yasuo, Yasuo Zoldyck. This is kind of late, but it's an honor to meet you, Miriam." Miriam didn't bother asking how he knows his name. Instead, he asked the question that's actually puzzling him, the question that ignited his dying curiosity: are you really human? Okay. Quick mandatory cult break. Stretch your legs, hydrate, touch grass if possible, and whisper "All Hail Supreme Killua" into the void. Okay, let's keep going. Chapter 144. Yasuo raised his brows before letting out a small smile and answering, "Oh, excuse my rudeness, I'm Yasuo, Yasuo Zoldyck. This is kind of late, but it's an honor to meet you, Miriam." Miriam didn't bother asking how he knows his name. Instead, he asked the question that's actually puzzling him, the question that ignited his dying curiosity. "Are you really human?" To which Yasuo nodded, no minding answering the simple question, "Yeah, but hopefully that'll change soon." Miriam nodded in understanding. Humans aren't scary, but some of them are, and he's a special case. He is an anomaly even among those peculiar ones. He is someone who isn't satisfied with being just human and doesn't have any connection towards humanity, or at least that is what Miriam understood. This marked the passing of the third minute, leaving only 2 minutes. That last minute was enough for someone with a thinking process at the speed of light to come up with countless ideas on how to win and what he needs to do. 2 bright minds with that difference is enough to make one feel desperation. Well, except Yasuo, whose eyes are gleaming with intelligence and cautious thinking of the implications of such an ability. Thinking at the speed of light. I simply can't even begin to imagine how his thought process is like. Such an ability is simply horrifying, so how can one win over someone with such a power who's able to think at that speed? No one can. The longer the battle, the less the chances of winning becomes, and this is something he predicted. No matter what Yasuo does, there will be countermeasures such opponent can use to win, Yasuo was able to go for this long simply by stalling and using his arsenal of abilities as a surprise to negate whatever the opponent has in mind. Desperation is what one in Yasuo's position should be feeling at the moment. He however felt no such thing. Only he can make people feel what they don't want to feel. Instead, he felt another feeling, an extremely familiar feeling. A feeling he feels whenever he gets a new idea, whenever his curiosity over something ignites as he looks forward to researching what piqued his interest thoroughly, then expanding on it, creating something greater. Then watching his fascinating creation with joy deep inside, enjoying the process of finding what to research, and during the research then that sense of achievement, seeing the results. That is what he's feeling at the moment during this bizarre fight, curiosity on how many ways he can win. He'll research later, how he can win now. Testing the limits he couldn't test previously because no one stands at the stage he stands upon. With his new ability, the king was able to reach that stage, so what Yasuo considers this is an experiment he's conducting among his other goals here. So how will the king break the unbreakable? And how will Yasuo fight the undefeatable mind? Well, for Yasuo the answer is quite simple: tricks while using his destructive abilities he hasn't used yet. On the other hand, Meruem started using the countermeasures he thought of against the spherical portal. One of the ideas is quite simple: he'll just win if he forced Yasuo to be on the defensive side, since he noticed something when Yasuo used that ability. He noticed that when the latter is completely surrounded by the spherical portals, the massive purple bubble enveloping the surroundings disappear. The bubble that Meruem is pretty is responsible for the hand's strange movement as well as some peculiarities he noticed about Yasuo. So he naturally assumed that when the spherical portal is being used, he can't use that particular ability, meaning he can't attack him at all. While the other method he found is quite interesting, to say the least. Meruem retracted every photon sphere back before starting the same scene as before. Numerous rage blasts within the photons spread between the countless empty photons as they started moving towards the empty destination photons. Only, Yasuo happened to be in their way, meaning the blasts will need to pass through him. So of course, he created the spherical portal again, protecting him against the oncoming missiles, and they simply went through it, appearing from the destination portals. And this is when a strange thing happened. As the loaded photon exited the portal and was heading towards the nearest barrier seeking to explode, it suddenly changed its movement direction, going back to the portal simply because the destination photon has changed from the one behind Yasuo to another one behind the destination portal. The countless photons scattered throughout tens of miles around allowed him to achieve this, which also allowed him to ignore a specific weakness of the ability, if it could even be called that. The fact that if the moving loaded photon changed direction either forcefully or willingly, it causes the destination photon to disappear. Just like how going through the portals forcefully changes their directions, which means at that point, Meruem needs to choose another one, else they'll just go in that specific direction infinitely until they face some kind of barrier. And the ability would have been much stronger if Meruem is able to move the destination photon, but no, he can't. Once a destination photon is chosen, it will remain static in the same spot. And so, an interesting scene happened, the scene of that loaded photon reaching that portal once again before it closed, which was only possible because the photon's destination was changed almost instantly after it passed. Except, this time as it was halfway through the portal, it was faced by a barrier, by another loaded photon colliding with each other, which set off a small explosion. Just one explosion among the many, because those weren't the only loaded photons that collided. No, many photons slammed into each other in various ways, setting off a bunch of small explosions that seemed to support one another to create a bigger and bigger explosion. An explosion strong enough to evaporate everything within more than a mile of the surroundings. Yasuo was right. He was in a state of near invulnerability until he wasn't anymore, because the weakness of the skill he is using is the skill itself. It's possible to destroy the thing responsible for that invulnerability. After all, the portals are made with Nen. If the photons just went through the portal, that would have caused no damage to them, but no, What Miriam did is caused explosions within and in the surroundings of the portal, explosions large enough to affect what the portal is composed of, Nen. A simple solution, just like he can destroy the vision construct, he also assumed he can affect the portals, albeit at a hefty cost, because a significant portion of the loaded photons gets consumed. And that's not just a simple consumption of Nen, there is more. He made a sacrifice to create the ability, and he's sacrificing something continuously the longer he uses it, especially retracting the photons to create new ones. That has a hefty cost, but Miriam exploited a plot hole, making that price negligible in the grand scheme of things. He is already dying after all. Miriam remained static in the air, not leaving the large photon at all. He just observed and manipulated the countless photons he can control like they're his limbs. The grand orchestrator behind the scenes just watching as the orbital portal dissolved into nothingness, yet what appeared behind it is another round portal, keeping him safe from any harm. That didn't bother Miriam, as knows he just needs to keep him on the defensive side to win. And noticing that Yasuo's domain is still not there made him more sure that the purple hands teleporting are the result of whatever ability that is. The purple bubble has disappeared, but he didn't let his guard down. This is not just a fight for that specific deal, no, it became much more than that. This is a fight of egos, proving who's superior. Proving who is the strongest, though while Yasuo is enjoying this, it's for a different reason. Most things are a research journey for him, and this happened to be a special one. As for proving who is the strongest, well, he already knows the answer. As for the king, he is enjoying the bizarre fight thoroughly, a fight so strange he simply couldn't imagine it happening before, especially with a human. He is enjoying it more than he ever imagined himself enjoying fighting, to the point a small smile surfaced on his face, with curiosity apparent in his eyes, wondering just what the human will do now since he is facing an inescapable situation. To the point, he started forgetting about the fact he's dying quickly, something he doesn't like but didn't affect him much. Now, however, he truly ignored that fact, just enjoying the moment, with a part of his brain still focusing on the light within the tunnel, wishing to meet her, enjoying his last moments. Satisfied. Tricks, a crafty procedure or practice meant to deceive or defraud, that is what Yasuo used throughout the fight. According to the legends, Devils lies and deceives quite a lot, so how can one expect anything else from him? His control domain is absolute, no barrier can get in its way. The domain can appear instantly, so how can a mere portal get in its way? This was but a mere hoax he orchestrated, hiding what's actually happening within that spherical portal and what's about to come, something the king simply wasn't able to react to at all. Chapter 145. His control domain is absolute, no barrier can get in its way. The domain can appear instantly, so how can a mere portal get in its way? This was but a mere hoax he orchestrated, hiding what's actually happening within that spherical portal and what's about to come, something the king simply wasn't able to react to at all. Before the king can react, the weakness of his ability was exploited. He can move at near speed of light. That's true, but that doesn't mean that speed affects him, because if so, he will start gaining more and more mass the closer he is to the speed of light. That's just how the laws of physics work. That will continue until his mass becomes infinite, which is simply impossible, as he'll be dead long before that. Light is the fastest velocity at which an object can travel in a vacuum. As an object moves, its mass also increases. Near the speed of light, the mass is so high that it reaches infinity, and would require infinite energy to move it, thus capping how fast an object can move. The photons are capable of moving at that speed simply because they have no mass, meaning moving at that speed has no effect on them. They will always be massless, allowing them to move at that speed. However, Miriam has mass, meaning he will be affected by that high speed, making his mass become bigger and bigger, which means he will need more and more energy to move any further, and that's simply impossible. But if the ability allows him to breach that rule and gaining all that mass without the need for the required energy, then that'll make him much stronger than he is. An object moving at the speed of light with infinite mass colliding with another object, that'll have horrendous consequences for both, but that's simply impossible for Miriam. All his ability allows him to do is move at that speed within the spherical photon without being affected by the laws of physics inside, meaning he won't gain more mass. But one thing always holds true for the ability: he needs an already existing space to move, because if there is an obstacle on the way, he will need to either destroy it or change directions, and that's a weakness. Imagine that from everywhere, obstacles appeared, not allowing you to have any direction to through. Darkness from everywhere, with the faint shade of purple coming from the massive purple hands, as well as the thing that made his sense of danger scream for him to evade it at any cost. Deception, something that has grown with humanity throughout history. They became better at it just like Yasuo has, and he didn't shy out from using it to thoroughly mislead Miriam. And no matter how cautious the latter was, he didn't escape the assassin's deception. Even though the king predicts such a possibility, the possibility that he can actually use his domain even when he's within the spherical portal, so he kept a distance of miles from Yasuo and just observed, while also manipulating the countless photons to continue his attacking spree. He kept in mind at all times that there are numerous possibilities on how Yasuo can get out of the situation. A simple one is just teleporting from within that portal, or another idea is trying to teleport him to some location through his portal, so the king kept his absolute attention on the surroundings, knowing full well he can react fast enough before a portal envelop him. The possible combination of Yasuo's known abilities truly puzzled even someone like him for a bit before his continuous thinking came to some conclusions. But he will always be limited by the amount of information he has. He can assume, but he can never truly know what's hidden within Yasuo's sleeves. Until Miriam noticed something he simply couldn't react to, not because of his reaction time, because it's unrivaled, no, it's because there are very few things he can do to stop it, as Yasuo noticed quite a lot of weaknesses in his photon ability. Miriam will need to retract the photons to create new ones, and he was planning to retract them again since they started running down, but that's what Yasuo was waiting for, as he created a phenomenon that would break anyone's common sense once seen. Portals so big it's mind-boggling how a human can do such a thing, hundreds of miles away, that strange phenomenon taking place. Miriam can react fast enough and move fast enough to avoid any portal being created that could entrap him, because the speed of light is just that fast. Even with how much training Yasuo has done, his portal's ability still takes time to use. It takes time for him to create portals, time that would look instantaneous for most, but to Miriam, it's simply too slow. Light can go around the Earth 7.5 times in 1 second, and while Miriam's ability isn't really as fast as light, it's near that speed enough for him to avoid anything Yasuo can do with his level of power. So what Yasuo chose to do is a form of deception, of cheating, preparing for the future before it happened. And preparing for something that will take him tens of minutes to complete with his current level of power, unless he activated his debt collector ability, but he didn't need to since he had time to prepare. And so hundreds of miles away, a portal so large it's able to hide the sun and the moon behind it. In fact, not just one portal appeared, 6 appeared, which Miriam would have had time to react to if not for the way to appear. Hundreds of miles down the ground and in the sky and every other direction, Yasuo created something Miriam wasn't able to notice. He slowly created it across the last 3 minutes. He creates an extremely thin portal, basically, an unnoticeable line that went on for hundreds of miles but never any closer to the fighting location. And from that extremely thin portal, another one appeared, though this one was created along and is just teleporting through a source portal to appear here from the thin destination portal. The portals that appeared are all strange with extremely similar shapes. They're all square, and their massive size allowed them to meet up with each other, instantly forming into a cube. A dark cubic prison from which anyone can leave, albeit to the destination Yasuo desires. Miriam found himself entrapped, not expecting this at all, as his mind started to think of how this could happen. He tried exiting the perimeter before the cube is fully formed, but he couldn't, with only 10 miles distance left between him and the now fully formed cube, as if everything was calculated perfectly. The thin portals from which the other portals appeared were placed in a distance far enough for light to only reach them from the location of the fight and the amount of time needed for the cube to fully form. The mind of Yasuo combined with his control domain allowed for such a calculation to be possible, though the most important thing is time. The time needed to calculate it, and he had plenty due to his vision eye ability allowing him to see the future. Meruem was somewhat surprised because according to his calculations, observing how Yasuo's Nen behaves when creating portals, such a thing shouldn't be possible unless Yasuo started that operation before he even got here. That made Meruem's eyes widen, understanding something, throughout the entire fight, how much of what he observed is actually true. And how much is the human hiding? Quite a lot, it seems, as he turned around looking at the spherical portal far away that started dissolving, showing what's inside. Nothing. Was Yasuo even inside in the first place? And where is he now? Meruem thought of all of that almost instantly before targeting the weakness of whatever plan Yasuo has. The fact that the dark cube is but a portal and he can destroy it, giving him safe passage, so he started doing so before it's too late while keeping distance from it, else he will get teleported to where Yasuo wants him to. And he needs to do so quickly because the massive dark cube is becoming smaller and smaller, shrinking, seeking to consume him. And at an incredible speed at that. To point, it would take but a few seconds to consume Meruem, teleporting him away. Yasuo prepared thoroughly, so of course, he has prepared for the portal's weakness. Well, he didn't really need to prepare, as he just waited static in the vacuum of space, observing everything through the invisible eyes everywhere. And waiting until Meruem is close to destroying parts of the cube, then he creates a distorted portal behind that to stop the breach. He also started his next sequence of action, which simply consisted of creating portals everywhere within the cube to teleport most of the photons elsewhere forcefully. Until Meruem simply gave up and allowed the dark cube to consume him, teleporting him to the destined location, one he couldn't anticipate because he lost his connection with photons that went through the cube. And because of the location's peculiarity. Allowing that, however, was a mistake that made Yasuo's plan go much smoother. And so, Meruem found himself standing in the vacuum space with the moon not far below him, unable to breathe. Chapter 146. Until Meruem simply gave up and allowed the dark cube to consume him, teleporting him to the destined location. A destination he couldn't anticipate because he lost his connection with photons that went through the cube, and because of the location's peculiarity. Allowing that, however, was a mistake that made Yasuo's plan go much smoother. And so, Meruem found himself standing in the vacuum space with the moon not far below him, unable to breathe. However, that wasn't much of an obstacle for the current king. He judged the moment he arrived here that he could survive without oxygen for few hours easily, so he really didn't consider it a disadvantage being here. In fact, he considers it an advantage, as light shines best in the vacuum of space, but that doesn't mean he actually has an advantage. He is basically in the enemy's land, the land Yasuo summoned him to, so it's only natural he prepared accordingly. The good thing about the portal ability is that while creating portals takes time, closing them is actually instantaneous. The moment Meruem appeared from the portal in the middle of space is the moment the portal closed instantly. Just what? How? Speechlessly questioned the king, looking at the abnormal scene before him and realizing a mistake he made, or a mistake he was forced to make as per Yasuo's scheming. Only a small portion of the photons has followed him here, while the other ones remained back in their previous fight location, and some were teleported somewhere by Yasuo. This is the mistake he made. To create new photons, he has to retract all the other ones before he can create new ones, but there is something about his ability that's interesting. The empty photons can go through physical objects without a problem. And even though he lost his connection with the photons because of the extremely long distance, once he decided to retract them, they'll come to him themselves. However, now they're standing on the gray land of the moon, far from the insanely massive planet, so naturally, light will take some time to reach the moon, as in Yasuo's previous world, it takes about 1.3 seconds, while on this world, light will take about 6 seconds to do so. That's enough time for Yasuo to do whatever he wants. The things he has been preparing are for these few seconds. For Yasuo, they make a huge difference, and so Miriam was stunned looking at the vision construct high in the air with the same purple bubble surrounding them, as well as something else that can send chills through the observer's skin. The purple spheres with what looked like black lightning flying around each of them, tens of such massive orbs hovering all around Yasuo's domain. Though the ones that seem to be the most dangerous are the ones placed on the construct's hands, while the other ones are just hovering around it. You lost. No, you never had a chance. Simply remarked Yasuo in the void of space, except sound can't travel in the vacuum of space. There is just no matter in which sound can travel and needs to travel, so all that actually happened is Yasuo saying those words, but no sound came out. However, Miriam understood what Yasuo wanted to say clearly. His perception in his current state allows him to process things at light speed, so reading Yasuo's lips movement was too easy of a task for him. And the same could be said for Yasuo, who can do that even without his domain, so he also understood Miriam's previous words clearly. Miriam slowly turned his head, looking behind him at the vastness of space, knowing that if he just spread the small number of photons with him currently, there is a chance he can escape. But he also questioned himself, how can the cunning man before him not take that into account, especially considering his strange space-bending ability? He frowned, noticing the fact that Yasuo is actually driving him to give up himself, to admit his loss, as doubts started to appear within the king's mind. Can he even win even in his current state? His mind was still at peace with the fact he's dying started, but he at least wants to win this fight, yet even his current mind can't think of a way to do so. Just how can he fight the ability to see the future, which would have been useless against him in the hands of anyone else but not in Yasuo's? His arsenal of abilities complements it, forming an unbreakable shield. So all Miriam could try is one last thing, as he instantly cut one of his arms and legs, with 2 photons appearing enveloping them before those 2 loaded photons with his limbs started moving around, using the empty photons around. However, Miriam knew deep in his heart his chances of winning at this point are negligible. I'm losing, aren't I? I can see ways to win, but those ways are unavailable to me simply because of the sacrifice I made. I can't create any other ability. My current ability is strong, too strong in fact, but it was faced by its nemesis. His ability, which ignores space, able to travel large distances instantly, combined with his future sight, makes anything I can do useless. Even if I continue to change my course of actions continuously, that change could also be seen. An ability that could make anyone feel despair failed to affect the human before me. Unlucky it seems. The thousands of ways I can win are completely unavailable to me, but even if they were, who's to say that's all Yasuo has in hand? What if there are more abilities hidden he didn't need to use yet? I'm doubting myself, and I don't like it. He knew he lost seeing the scene before him. At that moment, he got a general idea of how Yasuo's future sight works, and it's astonishing, to say the least. He saw the future of how the battle will go and changed the future, knowing exactly how everything will go. Yasuo saw through his new photon ability before it was even created and prepared for it, prepared for this exact moment before the fight even started. And he possibly prepared for everything he can ever do, especially considering he has the qualifications to do so. Yasuo is smart and strong enough to prepare for anything Miriam can do. So what can he do that wasn't already seen and prepared for? His photon ability is monstrous, almost impossible to counter, to the point one can only wonder how such an ability is possible to exist. He is powerful and is called the king for a reason, so he definitely has the ability to create such ability. However, even for someone like him, it will take a while to do so, yet he was able to create it in less than an hour, which is only possible because of the sacrifices he made. One of such sacrifices is quite simple but detrimental for someone of his stature and level of power, as he could have done so much more, but he didn't have time, so he was comfortable with making such a sacrifice. He will never be able to create any other ability again or gain any other ability again. A simple sacrifice not as hefty as the other sacrifice he made, but a detrimental one nonetheless, as it will limit his future, except he doesn't have a future, so he considered it as exploiting a hole in the rules of Nen to create the ability quickly, and the same could be said for his other sacrifice. That made it so he can't create any other ability he might need in the future or absorb any ability from anyone else by using his aura synthesis ability, so he was left stranded against Yasuo, who has an arsenal of varying abilities suitable for every situation possible. There is nothing he can do against him but try one last thing, but even that has a low chance of success. After all, how can he expect that someone who can face the speed of light to exist? So using the ability he absorbed from Yuppie called Metamorphosis, which allows him to transform, including gaining wings to fly. That's exactly what he did, gaining extremely long wings that enveloped him completely, seeking to protect him from any harm, remaining with the spherical photon that started moving around at the speed of light, specifically heading outside of Yasuo's domain. However, he didn't have time, as suddenly, tens of explosive orbs appeared everywhere around him without even a small hole from which he can pass through. They appeared under Yasuo's space control, creating a tight barrier around him, with the 6 strongest orbs seeking to destroy even the entire celestial body beneath their feet. Miriam already predicted this. There is no possibility of escaping, so he decided to instead tank the dangerous glowing orbs, pushing his unrivaled body to its absolute limits and using all of his aura to defend against them. Yasuo can say with certainty that Sylva's ability is the most destructive ability of its kind he ever saw, and that's why he needed it dearly previously, and in his hands, it shined brilliantly, reaching unrivaled heights. This is just the second time he used it, and its power this time is nowhere near the previous time, but is still significant nonetheless, to the point its light could be seen from the face of the planet. Chapter 147. Yasuo can say with certainty that Sylva's ability is the most destructive ability of its kind he ever saw, and that's why he needed it dearly previously, and in his hands, it shined brilliantly, reaching unrivaled heights. This is just the second time he used it, and its power this time is nowhere near the previous time, but is still significant nonetheless, to the point its light could be seen from the face of the planet. The explosive orbs making contact with the king triggered a fascinating sequence of events. The force of the orbs on top happened to be quite bigger than the orbs below, forcing Miriam into the grey dusty ground of the small moon, destroying everything in their way. The tens of explosive orbs surrounding Miriam from all directions weren't fazed by the rocky dusty ground they faced. They didn't even put it in their eyes, as they simply obliterated anything in their way, forming a massive crater on the moon. Yet they didn't stop, as they continued to crowd together specifically towards Miriam in the middle, trying to evaporate every cell of his, albeit it proved to be quite the hard task. However, Yasuo continued to control all the 10 orbs, pushing his control domain to its limit as the orbs started condensing due to pressure they applied to each other, as well as the king, who remained steady without any movement, hiding beneath the enormous wings of his. Wings that started to be affected by the insane pressure, as well as the orbs that can vanish anything from their way, though they're having a hard time doing so against such a monster. Except for the 6 main ones that Yasuo put the most attention to. The most dangerous ones that seemed to burn Miriam's wings, evaporating it slowly, and Yasuo didn't mind the relatively slow process, as he knows full well he has enough time. He just has about 6 seconds before the rest of the photons reach their location, allowing Miriam to create new ones and have full accessibility to his ability, because while hundreds of thousands of photons seem a lot, considering how fast light is, it's really not. Those hundreds of thousands of photons disappear at a rate so fast it's astonishing, as when he chooses a photon direction for a specific photon, that direction photon will disappear. Now, when you calculate how many times a photon can move in a second while changing directions in a space of 100 miles, only then will how many photons will be consumed in that second appear, and it's an astronomical number. That's why he needed to retract all his photons continuously previously, so now that he can't do so, he was left with a small portion of that number that will completely disappear in but a few seconds. So Yasuo ignored everything else and just focused on applying pressure on the orbs towards Miriam from all sides, forcing them to condense without allowing them to explode. He was already condensing the orbs more even before, but he still wants to continue to do so in the remaining time he still has. The simple principle of increasing the pressure on something to compress it more, for when it explodes, the effect will be much higher, and that's what he wants, to create a beautiful scene that'll leave an eternal mark on the moon. Well, he just wants to win, because he will need to do that to actually severely harm Miriam to the point he needs him to. A process that continued for 5 seconds, with the space being taken by the tens of orbs shrinking rapidly until it reached an optimal size, to the point if they got any more condensed it will leave room for Miriam to temporarily escape. And it was at that moment that something completely unexpected happened. Yasuo, who was completely focused on his control domain, suddenly moved his head down by controlling himself, since he can't move his body naturally when using the vision ability. Something strange that became understandable once Miriam's leg passed where his head was. The leg Miriam cut off once he arrived here, that kept moving around using the photons still around until Miriam judged it's time to make Yasuo lose focus, or at least try to. The moment the leg within the photon passed by him, it changed its moving direction again towards another photon. Yasuo happened to be in its way again, which he didn't mind, as even though he is using the vision construct's 6 arms to apply more pressure on the explosive orbs, pushing them more on Miriam, he can still evade. And that's simple with his skill set. However, something strange happened. Yasuo didn't move at all. He didn't evade an attack that's easy for him to evade with his control over space and ability to see the future. Instead, he allowed the leg to easily go through his stomach, forming a hole. Not just that, the same moment the leg shredded his stomach is the same moment Miriam's arm went through his heart, another limb he cut off previously. A strange event indeed that stunned Miriam, as even though he's still held prisoner between the explosive orbs, he can still sense things around with his N. Miriam was just confused. He had no hope of that working at all. He just wanted to stall a bit for the photons to arrive, which will allow him to create new photons and load them with rage blasts. And this is something he thinks Yasuo doesn't know or didn't know. He can only load the empty photons with his body or parts of it and his aura, but there is another hidden restriction. He can load his body or parts of it to empty photons as long as even one photon is available, in contrast to his aura or any ability that is partially emission. In that case, he actually needs to retract all his photons before he can load them with his aura, and he can do so only for a few seconds after he releases them again. Then he loses that possibility, and he needs to retract his photons again to have that ability again, which is why he needs all the photons far away to reach him. Using just his rage blasts without being in photons is basically a child's play in the current fight. Such a slow attack is simply useless against Yasuo, as he can easily evade it or just send it in another direction with his portal's ability, while with the speed of light it will make doing anything against the rage blasts much harder and create that possibility of winning. Yet here he is sensing clearly, as the arms within the photon took Yasuo's heart and his leg formed a hole in his stomach, something he didn't expect at all. And at that moment, he knew that only happened because Yasuo allowed it to, but why? Miriam just doesn't have enough information to know the answer. A strange course of action indeed, one that only Yasuo knows its purpose. He enjoyed the fight, that much is true, but he has a purpose for going through with it. He has several, in fact. Aside from wanting Miriam to take the fluid within the string and absorbing Yuppie and Poof, he has another goal, the main goal of all of this. So he allowed himself to be hurt. Of course, he couldn't allow the leg to go through his head, as that's his weakness. He will just die, in contrast to the strange situation Miriam is observing. A human without a heart, meaning his blood can't flow to every part of his body delivering oxygen and what his cells need to function, and especially if oxygen doesn't reach his brain. The central part of the operation, and where he controls most of his ability, especially his main ability, his control domain. Yasuo of course can survive for quite a while without oxygen for more than 30 minutes. He trained to hold his breath since his childhood for that to be possible, so he isn't worried about that. However, His brain not getting as much oxygen as needed will make it function not as optimal as he wants to, and his control domain needs his brain to be at its best. So since Yasuo planned for this to happen, he of course prepared for it, forming the strange scene before the king. A light blue shade appeared on Yasuo's skin as he started the zombie organism's healing process while using his control domain to keep blood flowing. Within the hole in his chest and stomach, blood could be seen, though not from Yasuo bleeding but from him controlling his blood to flow from the end of a vein which a part of was destroyed to the continuation of that vein through the invisible canal created by his control domain. And so the scene of the countless invisible canals appears from which blood flows as if nothing happened. Yasuo continued to breathe naturally as if there is oxygen around him, and well, there is, because he teleported enough with him here and isolated it in a small bubble around him, allowing him to breathe. Thank you. And explode. The calm words that didn't sound sincere at all coming from someone like him were uttered, and Meruem picked what he said through his N, leaving him confused until he heard the latter part of the sentence. He just frowned and shook his head slightly, muttering, "You win." And so the bright moon orbiting around the massive planet shone like never before, shone in a bright purple color, causing an even greater crate that will signify what happened on that face of the moon, something none but Yasuo will ever know. Chapter 148. Thank you. And explode. The calm words that didn't sound sincere at all coming from someone like him were uttered. And Meruem picked what he said through his N, leaving him confused until he heard the latter part of the sentence. He just frowned and shook his head slightly, muttering, "You win." And so the bright moon orbiting around the massive planet shone like never before, shone in a bright purple color, causing an even greater crate that will signify what happened on that face of the moon, something none but Yasuo will ever know. The tens of explosive orbs that were set free to do what they were really born for started expanding in a matter of milliseconds, taking a space of miles all around as their full power was shown. The expanding orbs that made contact with each other, trying to consume each other, were able to evaporate everything in their way within miles away. The explosion resulted in no heat at all, not did it result in lava, it just evaporated anything in its way as if nothing existed in the first place. The combined power of the tens of orbs exploding delivered the desired result to a certain extent. It was enough to evaporate a significant portion of Meruem, signifying the result of the fight, as the latter was left charred. It would have been annoying if you're actually able to regenerate at the speed of light, but it appears not. Remarked Yasuo, who just cancelled his vision construct, regaining control over his body with the holes in his chest and stomach almost completely disappearing. He researched the zombie organisms quite a lot and tried enhancing their functions, and well, he succeeded, and the results were beyond satisfactory. Although the consumption of the organisms increased, so did their regeneration ability, allowing even wounds such as these to heal in a matter of seconds, even regenerating his heart. This stands upon a simple fact about the functions of the organisms. The stem cells they make and release will always have the DNA sequence of the cells they're attached to, making the regeneration process safe. So he appeared next to Meruem's body that looks dead, except he knows he's actually nowhere near dead. Meruem's body is just that monstrous that he can actually survive with all the preparations Yasuo made, and the latter was counting on that. Well, he saw the future, so not really. Yasuo just looked at the body that's mostly destroyed, with parts of Meruem's bones appearing instead of the already evaporated flesh. No blood could be seen, as if every fluid within was evaporated as well. He simply looked dead, and he would be if not for Yasuo's next course of action. Yasuo first manifested his zero vision construct, the dark purple crow that appeared standing on his shoulder with its pitch-black vertical eye observing the king's body blinking from time to time. Only then did he create a portal next to him, from which he sent a few strings that came back in less than a second, bringing something else with them, something he didn't forget, as it's kind of a vital piece. Yuppie and Poof were utterly confused during the whole fight. This is just not a fight they could understand because they barely saw anything. The fact that this is a fight between a human and their king is mind-boggling for them. They just opened their eyes fully during the fighting, trying to see anything that could allow them to understand what's actually going on. No sound came out of their mouth, remaining stunned as even the hatred Poof was feeling was forgotten as his mind tried to comprehend what's happening. They just remained frozen in the air until, and before they knew it, a small portal appeared, consuming them into darkness's embrace. Until another one appeared from which something took grasp of them and attracted them to it, appearing on the face of the gray moon with the human floating a bit above the strangely structured ground. They appeared in the middle of the crater formed by the previous explosions and instantly noticed the amusement apparent within his eyes as he turned his eyes looking somewhere else, and they did the same. Silence. They simply couldn't utter a word, and they even forgot to breathe. Well, they couldn't breathe anyway. They only got out of their daze once something strange happened, until they were able to breathe without changing locations. They just felt a light breeze as if the air is actually around before they heard Yasuo's sound that traveled through the air he brought here to reach their ears. The whispers of the strange human can make one do anything. Go on, he only has a few minutes before dying, so if you don't interfere, he'll actually die. I believe you know what to do, so why don't you give your king some more time to enjoy? The whispers that targeted their deepest desires, their deepest weaknesses that'll force them to do exactly what he wanted to do. They have no choice. After all, they can see that if they refused, they'll just die with their king when they can give him a chance. That obsession with the king that was born with them under the queen's manipulation resulted in far-reaching consequences that'll force them to do what Yasuo expected them to do, as even Poof ignored his hatred and started the feeding process. They both started feeding the king their own flesh, their mind too affected by everything that happened over the day to think clearly, so they did as their instincts guide them to. And it worked, as Miriam quickly healed like nothing ever happened, though he didn't seem to be becoming any stronger than he already was. He also seemed to be unconscious until nothing was left from Yuppie and Poof. They were completely consumed for Miriam's full regeneration of his limbs and organs that were affected by the explosion, and even his nen as he absorbed theirs. His first ability is also quite abnormal, and if he had more time, he would have become an unrivaled monster. Only at that point did Yasuo make a move, a simple strange move. He created a portal from which tens of syringes appeared, then used his control domain to control them to the king's mouth and simply forced the still unconscious Miriam to take the liquids within. Strange liquids that have all kinds of colors, some have a smell of blood while some have strange smells. Liquids Yasuo prepared long ago, while some he prepared just recently for this exact purpose. He made for Miriam's ability to evolve as he wants him to be the best he can be, though of course, he made sure beforehand none of these liquids will result in Miriam actually surviving the poison that's trying to destroy him inside out. He used his control domain to make sure the liquid reaches his stomach, where his hungry cells can start feeding on them, evolving into a form higher than he ever was. And even though no increase in his aura pool was noticed, Yasuo, who is using his amplification domain observing the slow changes, noticed something interesting. He noticed the strange activity of Miriam's cells and nen as they started interacting with the liquid. Not all of the liquids had activity, as some were ignored, which Yasuo expected, knowing Miriam's ability needs an actual DNA to work. It needs the remains of creatures, not inanimate materials. The liquids that were valid by his ability standards were transported to his bloodstream, affecting every cell of his. His nen also acted strangely around the molecules that make up that liquid, with the latter disappearing rapidly as if being consumed, and that's exactly what's happening. As the king started waking up, his DNA started changing, evolving to something better, to a more well-structured DNA sequence with varying possibilities that remain unknown. A transformation that'll take some time, and while Miriam, who just woke, noticed the strangeness within his body, that's not something he cares about. In fact, he didn't mind it because he noticed it's making him stronger. That also allowed him to come to a few conclusions on what he actually wants from him. Miriam didn't bother asking about Yuppie and Poof, as even though he was unconscious, the moment he woke up, he analyzed his body closely, feeling that similar sensation he felt previously when they had fed him their flesh and nen, so he knew exactly what happened to them, and he didn't really care. That's not what's on his mind right now. Instead, Miriam asked something he's curious about, letting Yasuo know that his memory is intact. Were you ever there? Inside the spherical portal? Was I just attacking something empty? Yasuo nodded, no minding answering, yeah, I was never there. The moment I made the spherical portal, I teleported here and started preparing, and yeah, I created the general shape of the massive cubic portal here and waited until it's time to teleport it back. Peacefulness is all that was within Miriam's beautiful purple eyes. He accepted his loss fully and nodded in understanding. And while he wanted to ask more, to ask if there is more, Yasuo is still hiding within his sleeves, but he didn't bother, knowing he is unlikely to receive any answer, so he didn't bother asking about anything from the numerous things he is confused about. You have about 3 hours left before you die, so go ahead and enjoy them. What you want is beyond. Miriam looked at the large dark portal that appeared before him as the words were uttered, and through the darkness he went. Chapter 149. You have about 3 hours left before you die, so go ahead and enjoy them. What you want is beyond. Miriam looked at the large dark portal that appeared before him as the words were uttered, and through the darkness he went. Yasuo remained floating a few feet above the gray rocky ground and closed his eyes slowly. With a small beautiful shiny smile appeared on his face, seeing just how close he is to achieve what he wants. His greatest goal is his transformation and evolution from the limits of humanity, and he can see that goal is near, so how can he not be happy? He relaxed a bit on the moon that happened to be at its closest to the known world. In contrast to his previous world, the moon only performs a full cycle around the planet 2 times a year, so the moon in this world is actually a rare sight that only happens twice a year. This happened to be one of them. Yasuo then slowly opened his eyes and looked at the massive planet, so far yet so close, so far because the planet is actually 6 seconds away from the moon, a significant distance. So close because of how close it looks from his current location. The massive strange planet that looks but a few miles away from his location, the moon is but a tiny seed in its shadow. A planet so large and strange with gravity so small for its size. Yasuo noticed something about this world, something he noticed the first time his feet touched the face of the moon and arrived at the vacuum of space. Something obvious as he looked at the planet from a place so high. It's hard to see. The known world is quite visible and apparent for him, but the further from it the more vague everything looked, as clouds were everywhere until all that appeared is the dark clouds hiding what's beneath them. Hiding that dark world further away, but he knew it won't be long before his clutches reach it. Before the invisible strings spread everything around this mysterious world, before he unveils all the mysteries within and beyond. Yasuo then tried something quite fascinating, and it would have been much more fascinating if he succeeded, albeit this is something quite extraordinary that he already predicted would take him quite some time, possibly years. He started concentrating his aura in front of him while also creating an amplification domain area, pushing his control domain to its absolute limits. He closed his eyes and focused completely. The memory of all the times Miriam managed to harm him using his ability kept replaying in his mind. He specifically focused on the sensation of the photon, which is basically formed of Miriam's nen. He focused on that feeling when the photon made contact with his skin and his flesh, blood, and nen. The concentrated aura in front of him started taking a round shape, albeit it's still in his aura's color, that dark purple color, and well, his aura remained like it always was, peaceful without turning into what he wants it to. Yasuo wasn't discouraged at all. He knew the difficulty of mimicking such an ability, so he just continued for another hour with no apparent result at all, but that was enough to bury that feeling deep within his heart for the future. He'll try the process regularly until he succeeds, but from his first try, he judged it will still take a long time even after the planned transformation. Well, time to go back. After he said that, he created a portal with the destination portal being in the previous fighting location. And it was quite simple. The distance from the location increased the consumption quite a lot, but that didn't trouble him that much, as he rarely expends as much aura as he did today in such a short amount of time. The fight basically left him almost completely empty. His remaining aura is just enough for a few more uses of his portal's ability, though he had a backup plan which is basically using some of the debts he has yet to collect, but he didn't need to. All he needs is to see the destination and he will be able to create a portal there. Of course, there is a limiter to the ability, as even though he can see the moon from the known world, he's still not able to create a portal from that distance. He will need his vision to be extremely clear and within a close range to be able to do so. So he manipulated a few Aranan threads to move high to the sky and continued to do so until they left the atmosphere, entering the vacuum of space. They continued until they reach a distance close enough to the moon from him to create a portal within, and it wasn't hard to do so, it just took some time and he had plenty of that. A miracle is what it could be considered. This is what Nen allowed people to achieve, miracles hard to believe. The fact that he can teleport from the moon to the face of the earth instantly is nothing but a miracle, one that's only possible because of how far he pushed his abilities and insights regarding Nen. The mind of Yasuo is really wondrous, he is extremely smart, that is a fact, but that's not the only reason he achieved such a thing. No, it's the fact that he thinks, and he thought a lot for years. He is always thinking and will always think more than anyone else, even about simple subjects. His researching mind is his greatest asset. He appeared a few meters above the broken red land burning with fire and lava, resulting from Yasuo and the monster's confrontation. He closed his eyes, not that interested in such scenery. After all, he did watch nuclear bombs blow up. In fact, he was responsible for the massive explosions. He observed through the countless invisible eyes he spread throughout the island. There is a series of islands south of the Yarbia continent named the Balsa Islands. Among these islands, there is a special one he is standing on currently called the Mighty Union. The Mighty Union, a federation formed by 5 countries, the NGL Autonomous Region, the Republic of Rocario, the Republic of Haas, the Republic of West Gorto, and the Republic of East Gorto. It is located in the Balsa Islands, to the south of the Yorbian continent. The most special one of the bunch is the Republic of East Gorto, a country that ceased to exist due to the Chimera ants taking it over and killing quite a lot of people within, and the rest were departed away by the Hunters Association, though not many people were left due to Poof transforming most of them with his ability, turning them into a hybrid of Chimera ants. The Republic of East Gorto, a name soon to be changed, the Silver Snake has already extended its clutches to the Mighty Union, a name that will also change. The power of the Silver Snake family is simply unimaginable to even countries such as these, and the snake already started spreading its poison quite a while ago. Yasuo of course helped by getting rid of some vital people, and he did so discreetly in his own strange ways. A simple way, as in using his invisible Aranan threads to control tens of Chimera ants he captured and are still alive though unconscious. He teleported them to the capitals of the other countries of the Union and manipulated them to simply exterminate every single person of the royal families there and the people of a high status that controls the country to a certain extent. Until he left all the remaining 4 countries leaderless and in chaos due to the small disorder he caused all around, making it easier for the snake to poison the vulnerable countries. That poison will force the rest of the powers in the known world to transport all the citizens to safe places of the world, and that's exactly what he wants. What he wants is a safe haven for him that'll be inhabited by the Silver Snake family as a guard and manpower, and Morena and him and Aluka. A place where he can leave his house and, most importantly, his lab. After all, he can't take it with him to the Dark Continent as the place is too dangerous, so he doesn't want to risk it. Instead, he prefers to leave his lab and the precious things inside safe in the known world, as he can just teleport back here whenever he wants. He just needs to build a network of arrow-eye threads to the Dark Continent and the New World. Something strange about the known world is that it survived in the middle of a lake in the middle of the Dark Continent. How? That simply can't be a coincidence in Yasuo's mind. There is a sequence of events that happened across history that allowed Yasuo to come to a simple and logical conclusion about why the possibility of life here exists. Chapter 150. Something strange about the known world is that it survived in the middle of a lake in the middle of the Dark Continent. How? That simply can't be a coincidence in Yasuo's mind. There is a sequence of events that happened across history that allowed Yasuo to come to a simple and logical conclusion about why the possibility of life here exists. Every time there is an expedition to the Dark Continent and they face a calamity, there is a resulting consequence of that action which affects the known world, and that happened every time. The resulting consequences have the potential to exterminate humanity entirely. The only variable to this day that goes against this sequence of events is the most recent one, the Chimera ants, a type of magical beasts that were most likely from the Dark Continent. But who's to say someone secretly went to the Dark Continent and had some kind of responsibility in this, or someone is already in the Dark Continent and caused this, perhaps directly or indirectly? And perhaps, like one of his theories states, the gatekeeper is responsible for most of the calamities having the ability to affect the known world simply because they allowed them to. So the gatekeeper is a vital piece of this mystery. As to transport humans to the Dark Continent perhaps requires a price we have to pay. Yasuo planned on taking over the entire island a while ago as a base of operation when he's in the Dark Continent. A place where the Silver Snake family can remain safe without the dangers of the Dark Lands but have a gateway to that lands. They'll be the manpower that'll continuously poison the Dark Continent without suffering many casualties. He knows he can do a lot alone, possibly what thousands of Nen users can do in the same time span, but what hundreds of thousands of people with those thousands of Nen users can achieve a lot, especially considering just how massive the Dark Continent is. He wants to explore and enjoy his journey along the way, but he also wants results, and that's why the Silver Snake family is necessary. The biggest mafia family in the world, in fact, it's the only mafia family left in the world, as it took over the whole underworld, not leaving any possible competition. At this point, it couldn't even be called a mafia family. It's a force rivaling some of the strongest countries in the known world, and they know that. The world knows the family's strength and hidden strength, or at least they think they know. Yasuo and Morena allowed for such a thing to happen, Yasuo with some of the results of his research creating weapons strong enough to be taken seriously by Nen users, as well as poisons deadly enough to kill most Nen users. Though he only provided lower quality ones for them, but lower quality for him could be considered one of the strongest known poisons to ever be discovered in the known world, and the same could be said for every other thing he provided. However, Yasuo didn't really help as much as Morena. He has research to do, so he spends most of his time in his lab, and when he feels like he needs to help the family, he does so without anyone knowing, well, except Morena. She is the true leader of the Silver Snake family. Yasuo just has no interest in ruling the family, that's not where his line of interest lies. However, Morena found her hobby, and it happened to be quite simple, just ruling the family perfectly and taking it to greater heights under her precise manipulation and poisonous mind that knows how to manipulate people brings her joy. She found that quite interesting and enjoyed it, so she put quite of her time and mind into the job, and the results were perfect. Her hobby happened to be quite suitable for her, so she was able to turn the family into what it is today. Not just that, her bizarre ability allowed her to create a force like none other. She was able to turn normal family members into strong Nen users in a matter of days. Of course, at the cost of a few years of their life, and she only turned the ones she thinks are a bit trustworthy, or as she likes to call them, worshippers. You see, once a set of circumstances are provided, the manipulator was able to turn people into what she desires, true loyal members that worship even her shadow. She is the light of their day as well as the darkness of the night, people that will gladly give their life for her. Something she valued, because if they create an ability she deems more useful in her hand, she simply takes it, which will only happen by infected person's death, and most of them gladly take the offer. Else, she takes it anyway. At this point she's just that strong. She has been using her ability without stop, always infecting 7 victims, which the limit every month, which allows her to either absorb a portion of their aura or an ability of theirs. Albeit, gaining an ability is actually too hard, the possibilities are just that low, but even with that, her current arsenal of abilities surpass Yasuo's in numbers, but of course, nowhere near his in power and applications. However, Her aura pool actually surpassed Yasuo's, although not by much, but she was able to do so nonetheless, which is the result of her ability to absorb others' aura while Yasuo is facing a barrier, a limiter that doesn't allow his aura pool to become any larger. All because Yasuo doesn't have a similar ability that could be useful, but he never tried to create such an ability. In fact, he never thought about it because he knows he doesn't need to, nor will he need to, and his rise to true greatness is near. Yasuo focused more on how to combine abilities with each other to make the impossible possible. To allow the abilities to achieve much more than they were supposed to by combining their functions together and make up for the weaknesses of his abilities. This is how he pushed his abilities to such a level. So while an ability to steal others' abilities sounds tempting, in his eye, it's basically useless. He can already mimic some abilities easily without any consequences or any corresponding limitations, and too many useless abilities will just be an annoyance. He happened to be quite picky about what ability he will mimic. As for absorbing others' aura, well, he has a much better alternative that he has been working on for years. Evolution is his goal, and that'll allow him to continuously become stronger limitlessly, and the day is near. Yasuo remained static in the air for a while, finishing a few things across the island before he teleported away, appearing in his silvery elegant mansion. The mansion he just made previously, though he already decorated it with the furniture he prepared before. With a small smile still decorating his pale face, he made his way to the large shower room, and well, he took a long hot shower, relaxing his nerves, then wore some casual clothes and just dozed off for about 20 minutes on a comfy couch. Until he created a portal in front of him, and only a few seconds passed before a white-haired kid appeared walking from it, Killua, who was waiting for this for quite a while. Previously Yasuo appeared in front of him as he carried Gon's deformed and cursed body, wanting to go to the nearest place that can provide medical emergency, desperate to seek any help that can save his friend who sacrificed everything he had. And Killua's eyes couldn't help but gleam in a bright light, knowing Yasuo can just create a portal to somewhere safe and where he can get help. However, he didn't forget to ask something he dearly wanted to ask. "Can I meet her?" was his question. And Yasuo knew exactly what he meant. Killua took Illumi's needle out, getting rid of his hypnotism as well as recovering his buried memories, remembering Aluka, the closest person to him in his strange family. Yasuo didn't mind Killua meeting Aluka. In fact, her playing with someone close to her age is a good thing, so his response was, "I have a few things to do right now and you are busy as well, so let's leave it to later. In less than 24 hours a portal will appear in front of you, just walk through it." And so we have the current situation of Killua, who dearly wants to meet Aluka, and he already knows she's with Yasuo most of the time, or at least, when he was young, he remembers her always with Yasuo in his small house. Killua didn't get to say anything as Yasuo started talking directly after that. "Okay, let's get some things out of the way. You asked me that question previously means you took Illumi's needle out. I only knew about it not long ago as I'm not interested in the family business, and I didn't intervene when I knew for that same reason. Now, I'll take you to Aluka back home, or I'll bring her here and you can stay with her as long as you like, as I'll be busy for the next few months, so travel around with her or do whatever you like. So do you want to go home or want me to get her here?"